Well, hi everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. I'm Craig Hamilton Parker. I'm a psychic medium. If you follow this show, you'll know that we talk here about all things paranormal. We talk about what's going to happen in the news. We talk about topical type of things that are happening from us from a spiritual and psychic standpoint, and try to see the way through the future and what's going to happen. And this video is going to be an important one because it's my main one for 2025. It's the main video which I'm going to make my main predictions for the world. You'll also be able to see other versions of this video because I'm going to make multiple videos on each topic that you'll get here. But this is kind of a good overall. So don't forget, if you're new to the channel, do follow it so you can get the other videos. And as usual, guys, I ask you for a thumbs up because that's really important to help the algorithm in these days where algorithms decide what we watch. So here we go. The predictions for the world for 2025. Welcome to Coffee with Craig. So thanks for supporting me, guys, through all these years. And those of you that come regularly to this channel will know that kind of at the beginning of the year, I always make a kind of a big video to give us an overview of what I feel is going to happen in the year ahead. And of course, we're looking at 2025 this year. So let me just quickly go over some of the things I got right from before. I'll make a proper video about this later on, a review. But so the most important things I think I got right, I would say, where I predicted, for example, 6 months before it happened, that Biden would drop out of the race for the presidency. I talked about the assassination attempt on Trump and that he'd be hit, but he would survive. That was really interesting too, because you'll remember, those of you that followed the channel would notice I said it quite a long time ago, but then just 3 days before it happened, I said, watch out, something's going to happen to Trump. And 3 days before it happened, then wow, that incredible near miss of, well, a hit, but near death for him, transforming point. So that was interesting. That even shocked me that I just became quite animated about the need to do that. I've been saying for well over a year, in fact, much further, right back since all the way through, that Trump would have another presidency, no matter what was happening in the legal things and the challenges that are happening. I consistently have said that Trump would win the next election. And if you look back at my videos, you'll see that I also said it would be a landslide, and that the Republicans would get both houses. And that has been, people have said, no chance that would happen. And I remember saying one of the reasons, a few reasons he's going to get in, I said, he's going to get the black male vote. And I said that way back again. And then gradually that started to happen. And that had become a major aspect of why he got into power. So that was very important. So those things were obviously important. That's going to be a major turning point for world events, the world leader, as it were, because the leader of America usually dominates the world predictions are way ahead. So that's happened. There's some of the other things. There was the Kate Middleton bravery thing that I said about. Kate Middleton would been an extremely brave person and the whole world would turn to her and see her as a hero. Well, her cancer battle that wasn't around at the time I said that hit the news, and of course she has become quite a heroic figure. As I said, that happened. I mentioned about the Baltimore Bridge too, and that happened as well. The collapse of that when the boat hit it. Do you remember? What other ones? Also, the Israel. I spoke about Israel and how they would attack Hezbollah. And do you remember I also said about that Mossad would do something to Iran and the Middle East that would be really strange and obvious, unusual and weird. And then we had that very odd type of attack that happened when all the pagers exploded in everybody's pockets. Who would have thought that? But that was a Mossad attack. So that was another quite important one that I think I feel I got right with that. And also about the Israeli air attacks. And also I said they would happen on a Saturday. I mean, the ones on Lebanon were launched on a Saturday, which is unusual because that's Shabbat, isn't it? I talked about the invasion of Taiwan would happen in 2025. I think I've got that wrong because it hasn't happened. So maybe my timing's off with that one. And I always say to you guys, I see through a mirror darkly, as I say. You can't see all of it, so I'm fallible. So I'm going to get some wrong as well. And that may be the case in 2025 too. I can't claim to get it all right. But I think I do a bit better than the pundits, actually. And I find it fascinating too, because these things come to me from outside, as it were. It's like I'm given them, like I'm given them. So I had quite a good hit rate, I think, this year. And other videos, of course, would be on there for more detail. So if you want to go and have a look, I leave the videos up, whether I get it right or I get it wrong. They're all out there. You can check me out and, you can criticize me if you want, but have a look at the whole picture and see how it comes. Now, this year, I've also tried to include a little bit in this video, some of what I call the raw data, as it were. If I've had an image or a picture come to my mind, and sometimes I'm not completely clear about that, what that means. And I don't want to sound a bit like sort of fork-tongued with things. So I thought I'd put that out as well. And you can see where I'm getting it from, what the pictures and images I have. For example, one that I'll share with you now is one of the images I got when I tuned into the idea of 2025 and what it's going to be like. I had this weird sort of dreamlike image, an alchemical sort of feel to it, in which I saw in quite a strong vision the idea of a salamander in the fire. And I know this has a lot of alchemical symbolism to it. I looked it up and it said it's associated with the element of fire, the salamander. And people used to believe that the salamander could endure fire. And it was also a symbol of transformation in the fire. So this connects, I think, with some ancient beliefs in the ideas that they could extinguish fires, they used to think, and things like that. And it's a symbol, I think, of endurance, but also a symbol of like the phoenix, that out of the difficulties, out of the fire, something survives, something comes out. It's also a bit like the idea of a rubus too, that eats its own tail. So all these strange symbols arising from my unconscious, these like archetypal type symbols, Jung would have called them, have been influencing my thoughts. And I think this means, that we're going to have some tough times ahead. But we'll endure them. We'll get through. People that fear for third world wars and ends of the world and things, I say, well, this is kind of, in a way, a hopeful symbol. And since it's full of alchemy imagery, the whole concept of alchemy was about creating gold through the philosopher's stone, which is almost a symbol of the eternal spirit of humanity. What the gold in ourselves is of course our eternal spirit. So I feel it's quite a helpful image. And astrologically, although I'm not going to go into all the astrology of all this because it's more like a psychic type of video you're watching here, guys, but there's also this really important thing called the Saturn transit that's happening. And in March 2025, Saturn moves from Aquarius into Pisces. I'm an Aquarian, you probably guessed. But so it's quite important for my sign in that respect. But I also feel it's something quite important for the world at the moment too. There's going to be a sort of a change of energy as we move into the beginning part of the year, really, from March onwards. So I feel quite optimistic on many levels. There's going to be so many changes. We're going to see big shifts, particularly culturally, with things like woke and the ending of that type of, well, I'm afraid I think it's a bit nonsensical, political correctness gone crazy. We're going to see a change of that things triggered by America. Lots of economic changes, of course, lots of political changes, But I'll put them all in the sections for you as we move forward. So let's go for the first set of predictions now. So these are my 2025 predictions for the USA. Now, this is an interesting one. So again, just looking first at the kind of the raw data that I saw when I was tuning into this and what I started to see, and you might help me with my interpretations with some of this sometimes. But funnily enough, I sat in meditation and my head filled with images of courtrooms and judges wearing wigs and attacking one another. And for some odd reason, in the background of this courtroom scene, there was a big full moon on the wall. And I have no idea what that full moon means. I can't interpret that. But perhaps something's going to happen at the time of the full moon, or perhaps they're just plain lunatics. But there's something about the moon was there. So that astrologers might spot when there's important full moon that these things might happen. So the initial first thoughts I had was, yeah, okay, well, it seems obvious. I think we're going to see major legal challenges to Donald Trump, just like they had before. But as I said before, I predicted that that Trump would get both houses, and now he's got both houses. Although it doesn't give him complete and his team complete control over things, this looks to me like there's going to be major legal challenges. So we're going to have the media turning against him as usual. We're going to have the legal challenges are going to be very much going to try to stymie the progress of what Trump wants to do in his presidency. But I don't think they'll win. I think there's good, but I feel they'll, for a while I wondered whether because I did see I have thoughts about would Biden in the last moments of his presidency perhaps even just pardon Trump, so that that's a kick to Kamala Harris, isn't it, really? Because there's definitely an animosity between those two still. Kamala Harris, I think, might try to run as governor for California, by the way. But I saw that, but then I didn't feel quite right about it. So I think the whole legal challenges are going to be happening, not just between Democrats and Republicans again, but the other way around as well. Because although I don't see Trump going out and taking revenge on everybody that tried to get him, I think he's going to drop that. He wants to get on with the other agenda. However, I do feel that there is naturally going to be some uncovering of corruption and voter fraud from the previous election. I feel that there is still a lot of unanswered questions, and this seems to me to come from more a journalistic side of things rather than the president trying to sort of stir up a hornet's nest with these things. I see it's still in the background. I see the whole idea of how America votes being overturned, much more emphasis coming up on voter ID, much more old style. Show your pitch, show your identification at the about the polling booth sort of thing. So I think that those things will become important, and I see new laws being introduced to safeguard future elections. So that's one of the early things that I feel will come out of this new change of presidency. So, like I say, Trump will flush out the state, as it were. I'm looking at my notes as we saw. So I put here, Trump will flush out the state, but will not be vengeful to his enemies. That's my actual quote that I put on my notes in front of me here. And I feel that will be important. The next point is anti-woke laws introduced. So he has mentioned this, Trump has mentioned this, but I'm seeing laws coming in introduced about things like men and women's locker rooms, sex change operations, education will be reformed. There will be restrictions placed on gender teachings, and all of this will see huge legal challenges, of course. But my feeling is that this will happen, and it will be put through and become law. Not just advisory law, but actual be set in law. So I predict that this is the beginning of the end of woke in America. And this will actually have a major effect around the world too, where places like Canada, places like the UK, places like the Europe, mainly Western cultures, have been, I think, held back by this crazy PC cancel culture. So the wall with Mexico will be completed and illegal immigrants will be removed. I mean, this is something that Trump has said. It doesn't necessarily take a psychic to tell you that, but I feel that he will complete it. Last time I made a prediction about the wall, I said it wouldn't be completed. It wasn't completed. This time, I feel now it will be completed. So we will see this, and we will see a lot of social unrest about this. You're going to see on the news lots of programs about families being broken up, children in tears, the human consequences the media are going to focus on, about how hard it is on people being sent back. But basically, I think the bottom line will be people have broken the law, people are sent home. And this is going to become, it's going to seem like that the state is very vicious, but they are actually enforcing the law. So this is going to happen, I feel. Now, there's going to be these tariffs coming in, and I'll address this on some of this now, but also some of the other countries that I deal with on these predictions. So what I put here is Mexico will be the first to see tariffs, as well as Canada, China, and Europe. Now, he's going to do that. He said about he will put 60% tariffs on China. And Trump does what he says, basically. And this will cause some I'm seeing short-term market problems. I'm seeing panic, a bit of a panic still, because, what's the consequence of this? The markets don't like uncertainty. And I'm seeing that we will get a few market panics, but like I said at the beginning of the video, I feel the ship will be steadied, where we'll get through it. It'll be choppy waters for lots of countries, lots of people, and lots of people have also been lining their pockets from these other countries and backhanders like the Hunter Biden and the rest of it. There's some of that's all going to come to the fore when this happens as well. Now, it was one interesting one that also came up, because I do readings for people all over the world. I get a lot of readings coming in from America, but also from Mexico, strangely enough. And I was doing a reading for somebody talking about Mexico and from their Mexican communicators from the spirit world. And because the person was in business, one of the questions that come through from the spirit were that Mexico wouldn't do so badly out of these tariffs. In fact, I saw Mexico, I've gone from a USA to Mexico, but they're kind of linked together, aren't they? I saw Mexico actually doing quite well from it. The spirit guide said that there would be hard times at first, but Mexico would not be as hard hit as expected. And that it would find new markets as well in Europe, and it would find new markets as well in China, and it would still be able to maintain its economy. And in fact, the Mexican economy, rather than suffer from tariffs, will actually grow. So perhaps there's going to be a deal done that might be a little bit more less harsh on Mexico. So I think Mexico is going to actually do reasonably well, surprisingly, which you would think the opposite. But that's that's a prediction I'm making here today, based upon an interesting encounter with the spirit world and messages that were given through there. Now, I made those predictions about an attack on Trump's life. Twice I said it would happen, and it has. And I feel there's still going to be more ahead with this, because there was also one other image that I'd seen, and I had shared it once with a TV program, but they didn't actually put it on. But I said I saw Trump. I saw him being an assassination attempt on him, because I saw him by the side of a car, and it was reminiscent to me of exactly what happened to Ronald Reagan, where he was shot or attempt on him as he stepped out of a car. And I feel that's going to happen, but again, that'll hit the news, but Trump comes out unscathed. He might have been, there was blood still. There was blood, so he's not completely unscathed, but I didn't feel he was completely wounded mortally or anything like that. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of attempts on him because he's got a lot of enemies in Iran. He's got a lot of enemies he's making in China. He's got a lot of economic enemies. So his life is under threat all the time. But I feel he will make it to the end of his presidency. As people have asked, will he make it because of this? And I say yes, partly also because those of you that follow the channel know that I'm very interested in the Nadis, and I did have that Brighan Samhita Nadi of Trump, and it said about what he would do after his presidency, that he'd become a religious type figure after his presidency, and that's all started to happen. You remember I said about, actually that's another one, wasn't it? I said about Trump would become like a religious type figure, and he kind of had a religious type of transformation after that first assassination attempt. In a way, but that the Indians were talking about it, that he'd been previously a Hindu in a previous life. But anyway, I digress, I'm afraid. I better keep to this because it's going to take a long time, this video, otherwise. But I see another attempts on him, but he will make it to the end of his presidency. I get the feeling. Now, this is another prediction that I'm making here. As far as I understand, he's had one term. This is his second term. Can he have another term after this one? I'm not sure how it works in US law. You can perhaps put a note in, but I felt that he'd do another term after this term for the next election, rather than JD Vance step in straight away, because I feel he'll have a presidency too. But I feel that I sense Trump coming in for a third term, as it were. Is that possible? Does the law change? Is this something to do with all those legal challenges that I saw in the first images and visions I had when I opened up my meditation to this? Now I'm going to move on. I'm working from notes this time. I usually don't work from notes at all, but I'm working. I have to do such a lot. I don't want to miss anything. The other one I put on here is Trump's health. So again, I don't think Trump's health will get in the way. Now that people are saying, "Oh, he's already demented," because they're wanting to attack him again. They're jumping on saying he's got dementia and things like that. The signs of this already. There's loads of social media floating around about that. No, I don't see that. I see him as a person that will keep strong mental health right to the end of his days. And physical health is not too bad considering what he eats and the rest of his lifestyle. But I see him continuing, like I say. So I don't see him being pulled out by ill health. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about Elon Musk as well, because I put down Elon Musk will revolutionize the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, when I put this down, we know that he's in that position now as I'm talking, but I was making these predictions before that happened. I saw a lot of interesting things for him and what's going to happen around him, actually. Musk is more, although he's this so-called Department of Government Efficiency is not kind of like, doesn't have the political clout that you can't dictate what's going to happen with this. It's kind of an advisory position. So it doesn't have kind of the power to it, as far as I understand this. It doesn't have the kind of power to it that a government position might have. And I do see that what Elon Musk advises is picked up on, and there will be mass layoffs. He's going to do to the government what he did to X, which is basically, let's pretty much sack everybody and let's re-employ those that are any good. So and it's going to be, obviously, this is where the legal challenges are going to be massive on this. But I saw him going through and actually doing a major clear out, and it will be, socially and extreme. But I'm seeing him doing this. very hard to do because people are so embedded in these positions of power that it's a job to shift people once you give them power. Once you give someone power, it's very hard to take it away from them. But he's going to try to do this, and there's going to be very high redundancies in government positions. But I'm also seeing work problems and work issues and unemployment in other areas in American society. I'm seeing a slowdown in the tech fields generally. All these people with these high powered jobs in Silicon Valley and things, I'm seeing a lot of layoffs. And this is not because of Musk so much. This is because of artificial intelligence being able to do large parts of the jobs for us, self-propagating AI technology. So I'm seeing, AI that can build AI, and I'm seeing again a huge leap forward as we go with this. I also see that there's going to be some. I predict there's going to be some huge, great leaps in quantum computing too. That's going to happen in 2025. They're already onto it with the idea of quantum computing. A lot of the most important things haven't been cracked yet, but I feel we're going to see a big leap forward in quantum computing, which is also going to be very significant for the speed at which AI can develop. I don't believe that AI can ever become fully conscious, but it can mimic consciousness. So there's going to be some very interesting things with that. And I think Elon Musk's role is going to be very, very important in the presidency ahead. But there's I also saw I didn't know about what Musk was up to. I went and looked it up after I'd made some predictions, and I saw a huge city. I saw a city that he built, a high-tech city, a future city, as a model. Now, I saw that in a vision, but believe me or not, I didn't know about this, but Musk has already got plans for that. So perhaps I was picking up without having, perhaps I've seen it unconsciously or something, but I hadn't, I wasn't consciously aware of this at the time of seeing this. But I saw this incredible high-tech city, and I see these cities having a certain sort of legal thing around them, so that it's an experimental area. It's an experimental city or town, it would be really, where we can experiment with AI, experiment with new forms of transportation, experiment with new collapsible housing and pop-up housing and things like this. And there's going to be some real serious interest in this. With and even flying, I even saw flying cars there. Actually, it felt like the Jetsons. I don't know if you remember the Jetsons. It felt a bit like the Jetsons to me. Perhaps Musk has watched that when he was younger, but I feel there was something like that. But this is also going to have a lot of consequences for Silicon Valley, because it's going to shift from California, and I feel the high tech world that California's been experiencing is going to struggle. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of incentives to take money out of California and put it elsewhere in America, to more Republican areas, right? So, if you're in the excuse me, if you're in the high tech industry, do please be aware that there could be very high risks in that area for investment at the moment as well. Now, ultimately, I feel that Musk and Trump ultimately fall out. So I predict that they'll have a major fallout in the end. Now, in the images I had for this, I had a strange image for this again, and this is how I've interpreted it, that they fall out. What I saw in the image when I was tuning into this, and I can't quite understand what's going on here, so I'm going to share it with you just in case there's anything unusual in this that might pop up in the future. I saw Musk tied up. I saw it like, if you know the tarot cards, you'll know that there's the image of the hanged man, which is a man hanged on the tree by one leg, and he's got a light round his head. So he's kind of in a position where he can't move, but the enlightenment is still there. Now, so I was tuning in, particularly trying to connect to the idea of Musk and what would happen with him. And I saw him like the image of the man in the hanged man. He was tied up. And so I interpret this as a feeling of the idea I'm restrained. I can't do what I want to do. He's so independent. He's a person that, doesn't like to take orders from anybody, including from Trump. So I think there's going to be a bit of a conflict there. But that might be a bit later on. Maybe that's not 2025. Maybe that's a bit further along, because I feel initially, certainly, that they're going to make some very important moves for social change, and the way things are done. And so I think it's, it's important that he's going to become a very important figure for this. And just keeping with that as well, one thing that did occur to me, and I don't know what you think about this, guys. Maybe you've got some thoughts you can add in the comments below. But Trump's father, Fred Trump, he. I don't know if it's true or not, but there's certainly a lot of talk about it, that he has or had the original documentation that the actual Tesla had written, Tesla's notes. And they say there's nothing in it. They say, oh, well, his idea of being able to do all these amazing things by wireless energy and things like that aren't in there. But it makes you wonder if there's some kind of, I don't know, I suppose some spiritual sort of connection between the Trumps and the Musk, and that there's this common theme of Tesla there. So I think it's very interesting that these things could be there. And I do feel that they're going to make some huge leaps technologically, because America's going to put a lot more money into high tech that is going to be made in America and can't be taken out of America. So what likes of Apple that have everything made in China and re-imported, obviously that's going to change because the hardware is going to change. But there's also going to be much more stronger restrictions on sharing our technology. But they're going to be thinking much more in thinking very, very big when it comes to technology and space travel, of course. And the importance of improving human life through automation, and this whole thing. So the Trump Musk thing is going to become something major. We've got a highly inventive man with a man that's a businessman. Put those two energies together, and we're going to have a very, very interesting symbiosis there of what's happening. I'm just going to look at the next page of my notes here so that I can cover everything, hopefully. So Trump's already started to put his team together. I mean, a lot of those people we've talked about before, and they're going to have a major effect. I don't know if I should go through all of them. We'll probably go through some of them later on as well. But Robert Kennedy, I think, is going to become an important figure. Already since today, at the time of making this video, the pharmaceutical industry is panicking because Robert Kennedy was, of course, a vaccine skeptic. And but I see him making a very successful job of particularly the food industry side of things. And I get the feeling we're going to see a lot more money and research put into these things, so we can actually say these things are good or not, because most of the research coming out of the pharmaceutical companies is obviously kept secret because they want the copyrights on it. But I'm seeing a much more legal moves again to reveal that research, to share some of that research, and particularly to share the negative sides of it. So it's going to be very difficult for pharmaceuticals in the way ahead. And also, there's going to be much more research done into the dangers of food and food additives. We're all eating things that are full of rubbish, full of flavor enhancers and things like that, and God knows what it does to our bodies. I see much more actual regulation coming in on that, and an attack on sugar and things like this. So I think America will become healthy again. This will set precedents for the rest of the world, because people might start waking up to the dangers that we have for those things. I also, on the Kennedy topic, I also see Trump making public the Kennedy files. He's mentioned it once, but I see that all being revealed. We're going to see what happened with the Kennedy assassinations. And my thoughts with that is it will reveal cover-ups. It will reveal Russian involvement and mafia involvement. I feel those two things are going to be proven in the reports that were covered up, and that Kennedy ultimately was killed by his own people, not just by a Russian involvement and mafia involvement. That there was government involvement in this, and I feel that's going to be in the news. We also, at the time of speaking, we also have an investigation going into the UFOs, and talk about that. Again, this is going to be revealed as well. Trump is going to bring that whole lot onto the table, the whole thing about what's going on, what was covered up and not covered up. We're going to get pretty much full disclosure on these things. I think there's still going to be many anomalies there, which we're already seeing this so often with what's happening at the moment. But a great deal more with that coming up as we move ahead. It's going to be much more openness, and I think this openness is going to be very interesting. Another force that's going to be very important, and I did spot this before, is Tulsi Gabbard. I was talking about this a lot in 2024. It's going to become a very powerful force in America. In fact, the female voices in America, J.D. Vance's wife and so forth, are all going to have very powerful voices. I saw her helping Trump before. I saw a vision of these things before, and also I've forgotten the name of the lady, the older lady that took power as well. I said about her, she would come in. The lady in the background, what's her name? Forgotten her name now, but I'm English, I'm not American. But I spotted her, didn't I, about the older person in the background that helped Trump. That was, and the person of color helping Trump, I think, was Tulsi. And I feel there's going to be a lot more from the female side, a re-look at human values and a re-look at what is it mean to be a normal human being, as it were. A look to family values, and particularly with the influence of Musk, with his his insistence that we're losing people too quick, that the population, it might seem counterintuitive, but the population needs to be looked at. I feel that the whole center, the idea of this family at the center of things, and that many of the people like Tulsi Gabbard will, I feel, have influence on those things and become a very much a uniting force, and a force that puts compassion into politics again. Not false compassion, but real compassion, real meaning about, we want to be families again. I mean, spiritually speaking, I always think that the family is the basis of society. If you can get your family right, then from that, the world around you starts to get right. The people around you your friends and everything connects in. And then actually the local society becomes better, and the world at large. The basis of everything that we've had in human evolution has ultimately been the family. If you have a good family, then you have a good tribe, and then you have a good nation, and then you have a good world. It should all be working at the basis of the family, with people doing their roles in the way that is most like their nature. But the world has gone off on another route where it said it's self first, and I don't think that's conducive of a harmonious society. So I think going back to those values, I personally think, is a good idea. And this is where there's going to be a lot of friction, and I probably, having said that, I'm sure I've lost a lot of subscribers already just saying that. But that is the way I feel to greater harmony, to look back to those values. And talking about bad values, actually, Epstein files are going to be revealed. I have made some other videos about that. That has just lost my screen for a second there. The Epstein files are going to be revealed, and I have spoken about that before, and I've got a full video out there. But it's going to reveal. I feel there's political stuff in there. Okay, we've got. I think Harry and Meghan are going to be tied up in this controversy as well. But there's going to be some revelations about people in politics that are very much been involved with that whole business, and they've been kept, because now the government change, I think they can't be protected in quite the same way they were over the last period. So there's going to be some real big stuff coming out of that again. And I feel that whole thing about corruption, there's going to be more too. Epstein was one, but I'm seeing something else coming. I'm seeing another big reveals about corruption in Hollywood, bigger again even than that one. There's something else coming that's going to be absolutely scandalous, and this is going to affect the whole media industry, particularly, and again bringing in regulations. I feel about these type of things, because the next one involves children. It involves children, and there's something been going on with children in the background that's been covered up, and it's involving politics. It's involving the entertainment industry too, and there's overseas influences in this too. I feel again we'll start to see that there's been deliberate attempts from other governments putting money into things or putting influences into things to sort of bring down the society, as it were, create scandals, create blackmail situations. Okay, so there's other stuff on my site about some of the other ones that came up recently as well, with those type of things as well, so you can look at that. So I've also got information about UFOs, and Area 51 will be released. I've said that, I've commented on that, but that will happen. Also, I'm back to Elon Musk, but I did find this quite an interesting symbiosis, as I'm calling it. But Elon Musk's Tesla gets a government military contract. Now that's going to cause major controversy, but I see in him getting he's not really in military stuff, and he's been kind of resistant about doing military stuff. But I'm seeing a military type of influence from Tesla now, and I see being developed a new sort of AI-based form of device for defense drones, AI-driven drones that work as a cloud, and stop incoming missiles. So it's a strongly defensive type of thing I see here. It's like a cloud of drones that you can put over a city to protect it against the likes of Kim Jong-un and those sort of, and Iran and things like that. It's a defense cloud that I'm seeing here. That is going to be a massive investment in this and AI military technology and also to counter China's rise to power. The whole idea of drone swarms, which we've already seeing, is going to become enormous the way they start to interlink and can anticipate it without human intervention. Stop a rocket, it will stop a rocket. Attack a military group, it'll attack a military group. But I see Musk involvement as a defensive sort of shield, and these are going to be tiny little drones too. They're going to be the size of bees. I'm seeing here miniaturized versions of these things. That is like a cloud that can be used. And also, I see SpaceX will get government money to develop the Mars project. Trump is going to enjoy the idea of we will, like when they said we will be the first men on the moon, we will be the first men on Mars, and I see that project getting government money. So I'm seeing SpaceX and NASA amalgamated, not necessarily joined together, but working together to do this. Boeing too will be given some help with these things. Boeing again, I feel there's troubles with Boeing. Troubles with Boeing, but all will ultimately be working together to making a very, very strong and big advancements in technology, as if we've got to outstrip China now, and so it's going to be like a race. It's going to be like a race. So, although I've also said that I see people being laid off, it's like in the traditional IT industry, there's going to be other new developments happening which are AI based, where if you've got coding skills, for example, they might become pretty useless, but if you've got imaginative skills and you've got engineering skills, those will be well sought after in this new environment. So So in response to Trump, I'm going to read it actually. In response to Trump's tariffs, China will impose sanctions on the export of critical minerals. And what I mean by that is things like rare earth metals and the metals required for computers and batteries. Now, this is going to be quite difficult for the movement ahead with the leaps that America's wants to make in technologically, because if we can't make the batteries, it becomes very difficult. If we haven't got the rare earths and these critical minerals, I think they call them, which you actually put into the machines to make them work, there's difficulties. And I feel there's going to be a tit for tat type of thing. And China's going to be very clever. Okay, you can have this, you can have that, but we're not giving you our critical minerals. And I remember that China went into when America left everything in Afghanistan and just moved out and let everybody have a free for all there. Not only was the military stuff compromised, but also China bought up a lot of rare earth metal rights in Afghanistan, the very thing that America should have held on to, but they've got those rights. So as far as I understand it, there's a shortage of these things already. And I'm seeing that rare earth metals is going to become quite an important talking point in the future, because it's going to hold America's progress back. It won't ultimately, but there'll be a scramble for mining. It'll be like a gold rush. And certain areas, and I believe there's these sort of things in Canada and Australia and things like this, those areas that have these resources, that's where I'd put your money into, guys. If you're an investor, that's where there's going to be money in the new mines. Those new mines are going to need to open and invested in very fast, and there's big rewards from that. And I'm also seeing, it's a bit like that movie Moon, where they brought satellites back from, brought mining back from the moon. I see us mining the moon. I don't see that in 2025, but it's close. I feel that that's going to happen once we've done that next spacewalk in on the moon as well. The man on the moon is already in progress to put another American on the moon. But I'm seeing talk about mining and setting up mining of the moon. For most of 2025, cryptocurrencies will do comparatively well. I feel that the economy, like I say, the economy is going to be bouncing up and down. So having money in property is a good idea. Interestingly, I've done quite a few readings for people that have been investing in property. So I've been looking into those things, and I feel property in America will do quite well. It's good to have money in things like bricks and mortar. It's good to have money in things like silver and gold. It's good to have money in oil, I expect, as well, because that will become obviously a boom industry ahead for America, the way things are going. But I still feel cryptocurrencies will be all right too. Meanwhile, other things are bouncing all over the place because there's still quite a lot of market volatility. So it's probably good if you're investing to keep a broad sheet of stuff, but keep some money in property, because I don't feel there's an American property bust. I get a feeling elsewhere, like Canada, I think we're going to see some serious problems, and also in Australia, but we'll come to those later. But I feel the property market in America is going to do okay. And interestingly, again, it comes from some other readings. I'm seeing a boom in the property industry in New York, because I see Trump wanted to regain the crown in New York, as it were. That's where that was his early stomping ground to make his money. And I'm seeing all sorts of new regulations to help New York become more of a powerhouse again. And even though it's mainly votes Democrat, I'm seeing the Republicans putting money in there to think, both politically, thinking we'd like New York to vote Republican. And I'm seeing all sorts of new opportunities for building in New York. It's like Trump's going to do what he knows best. And I feel rebuilding parts of New York is going to be very important as well for the way ahead. So longer term, so I see cryptocurrencies being consolidated later as well. So a lot of the smaller cryptocurrencies, I feel, are going to start to get stripped out. We're going to start to see consolidation of cryptocurrencies. We're going to start to see government involvement in regulation of cryptocurrencies. We're going to see some of the sort of more dodgy cryptocurrencies going. The type of cryptocurrencies that can bypass sanctions, for example, bypass borders. The sort of cryptocurrencies could stop the restrictions that he puts on China and things. A lot of the small ones going, and more government control in cryptocurrencies, which on the one hand undermines the concept of cryptocurrencies in some respects, but also gives a security to them. So that's why I feel if you're in cryptocurrency, and I don't really know much about cryptocurrency, the technical side of it, but I would put it into the most well-known cryptocurrencies, the Bitcoin type cryptocurrencies that have already got a track record. Be cautious of new ventures and be cautious of false cryptocurrency claims in a very volatile market. I'd keep your money in the more secure routes because there's going to be an improvement in the world's economy, I feel, despite some major jumps as it goes that direction. Now, coming to, again, because at the moment, America is Trump, because I mean he's got such a lot of control. It's unusual to be talking about a country around an individual because it has become that way with him. But I feel that when it comes to Israel, and I'm going to do some on Israel, but I feel that Trump will almost see it as his Christian duty to support Israel. And I'll give some more interpretations about that in the Middle East part of the talk that I'm going to do section of this section. But yeah, so I'm seeing quite serious sort of things happening with there, but we'll talk about that in a moment, I think, and later on. So I think we're going to get a actual a kind of a dynasty of Trumps now. I feel that J.D. Vance will be the next candidate after Donald Trump is out of power. So J.D. Vance, I feel, will step in for the next candidate in the next lot of elections in the distant future now. But I also see that shy Baron Trump. I feel he's a young man at the moment, and it's a long way ahead yet. But I feel he's going to become quite an important figure. I feel all the Trumps are going to form a bit like a Kennedy dynasty here. But I feel the Trump that him in particular, Baron Trump, I get the feeling Baron Trump will be a president one day. I feel him being a president one day. So that might be some way ahead, but let's put that in as a prediction now for the future. And I also feel there's, in a way, there's kind of, just like I said, there's a resonance between Trump and Elon Musk. I think there's also a resonance now, but almost energetically developing between Kennedys and the Trump family. And maybe some of the karma's being moved between the two of them. And perhaps like the Kennedys, the Trump dynasty will be plagued by assassination attempts, not just on Donald Trump, but on other members of the family. And so oddly, I feel kind of a link between, funnily enough, I felt the Kennedys and Lincoln were kind of energetically connected. And that's always as if the baton's now being passed along to the Trump dynasty. And with it comes not just good fortune, but also troubles as well. So I see the Democrats will lose the 2028 elections as well. That's what I'm predicting. And they will not learn from their losses in this election. They won't reform. Just as in the same way, the Labour Party here in the UK and the Tory Party are not reforming and not listening to the public. So that's another thing I predict. So economically, America's will be unstable for a while, but it will recover. Another one that Trump's hinted at, and also I say my final little prediction, is that Prince Harry will leave the UK. I mean, Trump got no sympathy for him, and he'll be out. Now, I'm sure there's 1,001 things we could talk about still with America, but I'm going to leave it at that for now for the American predictions. And if you're watching this video, you're probably watching the long video, but I'm also going to have a shorter video. Well, no, another longer video, more in detailed video about America, which will look at these predictions and some more and some of the live ones. So don't forget, keep following the channel, guys. Keep giving us a thumbs up, so that helps. And look out for those so you can ask your questions of me, and we can investigate some of these things in another one about America. Okay, now let's talk about Europe, shall we? So quite a lot to take in, all of this. I hope you're enjoying it. But so let me just give you some of that raw data that I saw again when I was tuning into this. I mean, when I tuned into the idea of the future of Europe, I saw just lots of images of street fighting, quite violent street fighting, because I saw burning buildings as well, and I saw big protests and street marches. Now, we're always going to get some of this type of thing, but it felt to me that I was in a situation that felt quite volatile, quite dangerous, almost revolutionary sort of energy in the air with this. And I saw, and then I was kind of in an image of flying above Europe, and I flew above Germany. And I looked down and I could see Germany below me, and I seemed to be flying through these factories. I'm seeing all these factories, and it was like, I think what I was seeing is like the big, huge automobile factories, Volkswagen and BMW and things. And I was flying over these factories, and they seemed to be empty. And so my thoughts are that this might be showing some sort of decline in Germany. And then it kind of flashed to another image, and I saw a flash of a burning French flag. It's like I went from Germany to suddenly saw French flag. So I think there's going to be a lot of troubles in Germany, and I think there's going to be a lot of troubles in France, particularly. There's something going to be some troubles there of some sort. Maybe these are economic woes I'm seeing, but I also feel there's a lot of social unrest. And I said I saw burning buildings, but I also saw a burning mosque. So perhaps there's going to be something happen where there's going to be a mosque or mosques set on fire. So a return to social instability there, and people turning against immigration and illegal immigration. So that's what my first sort of thoughts were. That's what my first images were. I'll share some of those extra things if I can as we move through this bit. Now I'm looking at my notes. So I think also, I was getting a sort of a sense here also of Europe being inspired by what they see happening in America, for good or ill. I feel they see being inspired much more. The general populace being inspired by the idea that that what's happening seems to be working over there. And I sense a return very much more to right-wing politics in Europe. I mean, I predicted this back in 2023 that we'd start to see this happening. And even earlier, actually in 2022, I saw the rise of right-wing politics in Europe. It's been happening, and I just feel it's still escalating. I feel it's still moving forward. And this whole idea of the free movement of people, which is kind of at the heart of the European project, really. I'm seeing that completely overturned, and the big political upsets over this really tearing the whole concept of European Union apart. Sadly, I see much more disruption in Europe as we move ahead. I also saw in Europe generally, I saw US troops pulling out of Europe. US troops will pull out of Europe. And as the US moves out of Europe, actually physically taking their troops out, I saw again as an aerial sort of view of this, of troops being moved and battalions of troops moving. In fact, I saw it like a game of Risk. You know, the game Risk of the Waddingtons. You might have played it in the past. It's a video game now as well, I think. But I saw it as a game of Risk, like on the board, and people being moved out and turned back to America. You're moving your people out. So that's how it came to me as a vision. But I see them moving out of Europe. That's going to be obviously very, very important for the balance of power in Europe and what happens in Russia, which we'll look at later. But I think that Trump actually when you think about it, Trump does kind of loathe the EU, and I feel he will punish um, exports from Germany in particular. Will put high tariffs on German cars, and French cars, perhaps, and French goods and French and German products. So that's going to be part of the whole sort of withdrawal from Europe. I feel it's not going to be easy for Europe to manage some of these things. I feel this is why I'm feeling, some economic woes and also some social unrest. And you take the money away from people, you take the jobs away from people, and these things happen, don't they? So that's thinking logically about this as well. I also on the sort of topics of the way these major changes will affect the world, because I feel the whole global warming and the green transition agenda is going to be very disrupted, because the sheer economic consequence of the way oil's going to change things in America and bring America much more prosperity, good or bad. I mean, we don't want to destroy the planet, do we? But at the same time, I think there's going to be a sort of a fuel crisis generally around the world. There's going to be a fuel crisis, but there's going to be a fuel crisis that's going to hit Europe. I mean, I know they have imports from Russia, and some of that's been dealt with now, but I'm seeing a further fuel crisis, perhaps something happening in the Middle East with this. I will talk about that later. But I see that Europe's going to be hit by a big fuel crisis, and they're going to have to rethink the way they produce their energy. So it's going to be a pretty dismal time for global warming worldwide. But I feel Europe is also going to be sucked into this whole thing. So that vision I had, I think, is the consequences of excessive migration, and the clash of cultures that's come from this, will be very much recurrent themes through 2025. It's going to become, apart from the economic changes that are happening in the world, I think there's going to be very much a rethinking, a reset of these things. In fact, in France, I see France actually on the border of full anarchy. It's going to be major problems in France. And because of this, Macron will fall. He will be taken from power. He will fall from power. He will leave politics abruptly. Let's put it that way. I don't see, another French Revolution quite as they had before, but I'm seeing the rumbles of something that could almost feel like that. I felt like I was in the French Revolution. There was a feeling of the French Revolution there. So I think there's going to be a revolutionary type of movement in France, which is going to affect the whole of Europe. Europe's ready to pop. There's a lot of countries that have got a lot of problems. We see protests in Spain, we see protests in Germany, we see protests in France, we may see protests in Sweden and places too. But I think France is the one that makes the big change. And there will be quite extreme forms of civil unrest, mainly about migration, but also about the fact that France is will find economic problems ahead. And eventually in the longer term, France, I feel, like I said, Europe's going to move right. I think Marine Le Pen will eventually be the president of France. I've predicted that a long while ago, but I do feel it's going to happen. And I feel perhaps this is the year when we start to see that happen. And, I saw this image as well of the Eiffel Tower against the backdrop of burning Paris. Now, whether that is symbolic again, like I'm talking, or is there a big fire in Paris? Is there some big fire problem in Paris? I saw burning Paris. The unconscious mind exaggerates these things, but there's something perhaps that's going to be, I'm sensing here, of a major fire in Paris. So that's one of the things I'm predicting. And there's going to be a big sort of disruption in politics within in France, and exposures of people being cheating, and taking backhanders, and the threat to democracy. And what happens in France in 2025 will affect the whole of Europe. So, and Germany, but France in particular, I'm seeing a big major social upheaval and change. It could be we're going to get some more terrorist attacks in France. Something triggers it. Something gives us a feeling that all is not right in the world in France, and that would be a trigger for many other things. In fact, one of the things I also saw is this may be separate to terrorism, perhaps, but I'm seeing something here where, again, in France, I saw gunfights, but they seemed, when I was there, I felt like gangsters around me. I felt like I was in Gangsterland. I felt like Valentine's Day massacre type feel with this. Or perhaps it's February it happens, but I saw Valentine's Day sort of massacre type feel, the old-fashioned 1929 period where there were all the gangs on the street with machine guns. So am I seeing an actual gang fight, a big gang fight in somewhere like Paris again, or maybe it's Marseille or something like that? But I'm seeing an on-street gang fight, and I saw tourists being mowed down as part of this. I saw tourists being hit, British tourists as well, because in fact I was looking at a British newspaper at one point when I was seeing this vision, of course. So it could be terrorist related, perhaps, but I felt there was something. I felt there was something like drugs involved, or drug gangs involved with this, or something like this. So and it ends up with a big, huge political row over this. Or why did we allow this to happen? Why do we allow this to happen? So that's one of the things I saw, sadly, for France. So I'm going to take my holidays in Italy this year. So, and I also felt that out of all this, again, because I felt France was the main focus that seemed to come to me when I was looking at Europe. But I felt as if there was going to be a big exodus of immigrants, not just in France, but the whole of Europe. I feel there's going to be moves to not only get rid of illegal immigration, but there's going to be moves to start not only to limit it, but reduce migration into the country as the European economies are hit partly by the levies that America's going to put on there. I don't think it'll ruin the European economy, but I think it'll put pressures on it enough that there's going to be some more unemployment and things like that. So I'm seeing migrants fleeing Germany, for example, because I feel a similar type of issues happening in Germany. And again, civil unrest there, and people trying to find new moving countries. And I saw, again, just like I saw that image of Paris, I saw something happening at the Brandenburg Gate, outside, right in the view of the Brandenburg Gate. Now, is this a big protest that runs out of control? Is this a terrorist outrage that runs out of control? But when I saw this, I saw Palestinian flags. So it gave me the feeling that there's something that triggers from something that has to do with the Palestine issue. But in particular in front of the Brandenburg Gate, something happens there in front of the Brandenburg Gate, because that was very strong in my image. Now, immigrations into, read what I've written here now. I've put down, immigrations into Europe will see a new surge from South America and Asia as the US border tightens. So, and again, I feel that immigration from South America particularly comes into Spain. Obviously, we got the common Spanish and Portuguese languages here, which in Spain and Portugal, I would add. But I'm seeing a large influx of immigrants coming into Spain. And actually, I saw Spain doing very well economically. I felt as if they were bucking the trend of the rest of Europe. I felt as if there was a bit of a boom in the Spanish economy, and a big influx of migrants there as well, particularly from South America. But also, of course, with it, I saw a massive housing crisis. Big housing crisis in Spain, nowhere for anyone to live. And I saw tents on the street in Spain and tents in Benidorm. I saw, it was like everywhere there was tents. I was seeing tents in on the streets. And I feel that this again creates an imbalance in the society. But I do feel as if there's a bit of a increase because of, I think, extra free, cheap labor coming in to the Spanish economy. So that was another thing I felt. There was problems. And going back to Germany again, because I've written down here, the German government will cave in, and there will be an early election in Germany. So I feel again, all out throughout Europe and also worldwide, I feel much more movement to the right, particularly once we've seen what happens in America often spreads. And I think people will switch to pro-right type of voting. So in Germany, that would mean the right wing. I think it's the AfD, isn't it, over there? Will build its will build its voters. Will have some more power. So I'm seeing that happening in Germany. There's a lot of intolerance I'm seeing beginning to emerge out of what has been perhaps an over-tolerant period. Often in history, we see swings like this, and often they're slow. I mean, when you look at the way things happen in the world, that's a gradual thing. We start to see it, and I think 2025 we start to see these things happening. The seeds are laid for these things in 2025. So some of the things I've been saying here might push into 2026, 2027, but they're the trends that are going to be happening in this period. So I feel they're going to bring in laws in Europe. Europe likes to make rules and regulations, and I'm seeing much more coming in on European asylum laws, and they're going to be radically changed. The Dutch are going to push for this as well, and they're going to push hard for this. The Danish are going to push hard for this. The Swedes are going to push hard for this. Hungary, Poland are going to push hard for this. And so I'm seeing the whole sort of method of doing things. I'm seeing like the committees upset that run Europe are being overturned by strong public and political drives. Even Italy's gone right, hasn't it? These drives are going to change the asylum rules, not only to stop people coming in, but I'm seeing people removing people and countries having a much more say in whether we allow more migration into our country. So the breakdown of the free movement of people, that's what I'm seeing for Europe, and that I think is probably the only way they can solve the problem of the public upset from this. Again, so it's all right wing, I'm afraid, for Europe. A great exodus of people I've put down from Poland the great exodus of people from Poland will be reversed. I'm seeing a lot of Polish people returning back to Poland, and actual rules put in place in Poland to stop the young people of Poland moving to work in places like Germany and things. So again, I'm seeing this restrictions coming, a change of the way things work. And actually, I've said it about Poland before, but I have a very strong feeling that Poland is going to become a very affluent country, as it used to be in the past. I think they used to call it didn't they call Poland the sick man of Europe, and they divided it up between Prussia and Russia and Hungarian Empire and things. Poland was weakened and had been a great nation, but I'm seeing Poland becoming a great nation again. And I'm seeing a lot of industrial development there, which bucks the trend of what's been happening in Europe. And also, in some respects, may also mean that Poland becomes more separate from its ties to Europe. I mean, Europe has helped Poland in a great deal of ways, but I'm beginning to see Poland becoming much more independent as a country and independent minded as these things move. The Scandinavian countries, I feel similar sort of things happening in Sweden. I'm feeling movements to the right there. Very strong anti-Muslim movement in Sweden is already beginning to develop. I'm feeling that's going to be very, very important in 2025. And again, similar public unrest. Unfortunately, that earlier vision I had is kind of clouded what I'm saying, perhaps, because I just felt as if Europe has very serious problems with people and the problem of the free movement of people, which is would be a major change if they had to change those rules in Europe. And in Sweden, I saw Stockholm, and I saw the ship there. I think it's called Vasa, the ship in Stockholm Harbour, which is kind of a symbolic ship that's moored in the harbour. It's representative of Swedish nationalism in some ways. So Swedish pride, have great pride in that. I just saw the boat there, and I saw a big knife fight going on, but I saw people with knives. And I felt as if there was an attempt to try to set that boat on fire. Okay. And I think it's going to be stopped. And perhaps me saying this will help stop it. But I want to tighten the security there because I felt as if there was an attempt to try to force a fire on that boat. And it was with, there was knives involved with this. So I've covered most of it. Again, I think Denmark's going to have very similar problems to Sweden with, again, swings to the right. I think in Denmark, the Danish People's Party, the Dansk Folk Party, is it, or something like that, will get some very strong votes in November. It might take power or have a strong position in power. Let's say a unity government of some sort there. So in Europe, generally, quite a lot of discord. I feel economically, Europe's still okay economically, but I think there's a lot less need for so many people coming into the country to take the jobs. There's less jobs and therefore more people dependent on the state. And I feel that America's not going to be very helpful to Europe. I think Europe's going to be looking towards China, but finding that there's too many compromises being done here with China economically, and the people are getting fed up with it. So I'm seeing Europe wanting to be individual countries again, a bit like at the start when we went into Europe, when I was a nipper and we were debating it in school, and I put the case in front of the school when we had to do a sort of discussion. I put the case for going into Europe and why it would be a good thing. And the reason then was because it was the common market and we could all work collectively, common market and less likelihood of war and things like that. Those were the original aims, not as making one European law system and the rest of it. So I'm seeing more people wanting to break out of the European human rights bills, and more people breaking away, countries breaking away from the also the political agendas of Europe. So Europe is not breaking up in 2025, but you're beginning to see the signs of this, which is something I made in earlier predictions, much earlier predictions about the breakup of Europe that will come in the longer term. So now I'm going to look at the UK and give you some predictions about the UK. So let's have the bit of coffee first. It's been a long haul, this one. Right, okay, for the UK. I see quite a difficult period ahead for the UK, particularly economically. The hoped for growth that Britain has been wanting, I just don't feel it's going to materialise. The Labour government here has been borrowing money left, right, and centre, from using money from pension plans, using money from tax, trying to get a big pot of money together. But I feel that it's not going to work out, because that money I'm seeing will all go to wage settlements. A large part will go to pay settlements and things like this. So money that's put into for example, into the National Health Service, for example, gets absorbed into just pay packets. And I'm seeing swelling pay packets for the UK. So unfortunately, with the UK, I'm seeing lots of companies going into liquidation in the UK. I'm seeing farm closures, particularly will cause food shortages. And I'm seeing many promising IT startups leaving the UK. And the government wants to put money into those things, but I'm seeing a lot of very promising startups leaving the UK. The entrepreneurial spirit of the UK is being suffocated by too much of the wrong sort of government involvement. So I also sense with the UK, I feel that there's going to be a problem with inflation. We've already had problems with inflation. It's been kept more or less under control. But I'm seeing again that return to those periods where inflation runs out of hand and gets problematic. So I'm seeing too much money spent on wages, on wage rises, and this promised growth that they've been talked about. I don't see it happening. I don't see us being in a boom period. We might get temporary booms. Yes, we might get, because you put a lot of money into the economy suddenly and you'll get the illusion of a boom. But the idea of longer term growth, I think, is going to fall apart, is my feeling. I'm sensing and seeing it falling apart. I'm not seeing a booming UK economy. But saying that, there is also some good news with it as well, because I sense that the USA is not going to put tariffs on the UK. It's going to take away tariffs. So compared to what's happening in Europe, maybe the UK does have a chance with its export policies. And this will help the UK because in some respects we'll have the best of both worlds when it comes to exports, because Starmer will build some bridges with Europe. Worryingly, I feel, because the hidden agenda here is that Britain wants to go back into Europe. They all want to be back into Europe, but we dare not say it. And at the same time, we've got the trade deal possibly that I feel is going to come with America. I feel America's going to say, okay, there's no tariffs. Trump's going to say no tariffs with Britain, or limited tariffs with Britain, but we'll do a deal which will be import-export deal. So if Britain wants to be led by growth into a growth market, it has to export, and to do that, it has to manufacture. So that's the way I feel it's going to go. We're going to go back to a bit more of the traditional manufacturing industries, which might sacrifice some of our high-tech industries, where only so much money to go so far. But there's going to be problems still with businesses being able to develop and build new business, and the small business and the farming businesses that are run by individuals are going to struggle. I see Trump will visit the UK and will visit King Charles, and this will happen in 2025, I feel, because it is something that will come quite quickly, and give an opportunity for the UK to be able to make some trade deals as well with America. So there's opportunities there, and the future is not completely set. Although I see a kind of a bit of a dismal path ahead. I see lots of big mistakes made, and big mistakes. So Stalinist type of ideas of how you're going to transform a country can often go wrong. So I see there's a lot of problems, but there's also a lot of opportunities here, particularly with America. And even Britain one day, far into the future, but I feel one day Britain will even be absorbed into America. America and Britain will become one country in a long way into the future, not round now, but I'm seeing that a long way into the future, that Britain and America will become one nation again. In fact, I've talked before about this, how we're looking far ahead. English-speaking countries of the world will form an amalgamation in the centuries ahead. But anyway, coming back to the present time, I predict that Trump will be coming to see King Charles in 2025. And although I predicted I saw the troubles with King Charles, because I said he'd have a short reign at the time of his coronation, you remember, and immediately afterwards we had the cancer scare. But I feel as if, I saw him having a short reign, but I certainly feel he was going to make a good recovery in 2025, actually. And the power of the will is greater than the power of fate. And this is something I think we should always remember when we're making predictions, or anybody makes a prediction, or even a doctor gives you a prediction of something. Even, the power of the mind is stronger than the body, and it's stronger than fate. And I think it's important to remember always to send healing thoughts to people like King Charles and Kate and the rest of them, and people that are struggling, and for all people, and even to our politicians, even to our enemies, we should send thoughts of positivity and love if we can, because that is how we will ultimately heal the world. But I'm going off. So I see a lot of strikes. I see the problem being ahead with the UK. I'm seeing strikes. So I'm seeing crippling strikes in the public sector, even though money's already been thrown into the public sector for wage increases. But I'm seeing people getting greedy, and I'm seeing public sector. I'm seeing transportation. I'm seeing transportation coming to a standstill. There's going to be lots of rail strikes, lots of shipping strikes, lots of all sorts of things that create the mobility in the UK. Problems with that, possibly things with petrol as well, something where I feel our ability to get around is stopped. Seeing something like that, I saw roads at a standstill, trains at a standstill. There's some form of everything at a standstill, and that seems to be because of people's greed, I feel. with this. So I saw it on the airports as well, and I also saw people carrying NHS banners as well. So I thought we were getting over that, but I saw NHS banners being carried again. So I feel we're going to have another wage demand, perhaps from hospital workers. And I also felt there would be on the NHS sort of thing. I also saw we had a problem in the past about blood contamination. And I'm seeing there's some problem like that of some sort. I saw something with blood contamination, something where blood is not quite right. And I saw empty blood vials. So it's like, is there a shortage? Maybe is something gone wrong with the supply of blood? And is there a shortage of blood? That was something I saw when I was trying to sort of pick up NHS. I saw, oh, there's something here going wrong with it. Freezer's gone wrong, something like that. Something went wrong in that. Okay, so let's hope we can get through that as well. As I say, with all things, we can change the future, but perhaps perhaps forewarned. Perhaps someone hears this from the hospitals and has a look at those things. Now, the Labour government are going to announce a massive building programme. That's not been said yet. This is going to be in one of their budgets. It's going to be, they're going to announce a huge building programme throughout the UK. They talked about infrastructure already, but I'm seeing houses. I'm seeing affordable housing. In a way, I think they're doing this as well because it would be like a way to solve the immigration problem. Just give them all houses, get people into houses, get roofs over people's heads, and they stop complaining. How we're going to pay for that is going to be paid for over future generations, because I'm seeing big borrowing going on to do that. We've had a lot of borrowing already. There's more and more to come. We're going to see a government spending money to bring this illusionary idea that we can stimulate economy by just borrowing money and spending it. It will give short-term gains but long-term crisis. So I'm seeing this as bringing about lots of problems for people, particularly when it comes to inflation. I'm seeing boom in inflation in the UK. This will be the problem economically in the UK, all this inflation going on, which is going to create a lot of problems. So interest rates are dropping as I make this prediction, as it were, here in the UK, but they will increase in 2025. It's going to be very difficult for people buying homes again, worse than ever, even though there's a influx and building of property. We can't build them quick enough, and there's a crisis in the housing industry because people can't get the money. They haven't got the money. They want the wages. It's a kind of a impossible situation I'm seeing here that's going to be very hard to solve. And there's also going to be many more tax increases ahead. We've seen a lot already. They're going to keep going and keep going. And I see the Bank of England also. I saw the Bank of England, and I feel that they're going to sell government securities to reduce the money supply. I'm seeing that happening in the city. So quite a lot of economic problems ahead, I feel. A lot of it due to crazy thinking is what I'm seeing with here. Also, there's secrets there as well with the Labour government. I sense that they're going to try to really get us to rejoin Europe. They're saying, oh, we're going to try to make things better. We're going to try to build trade with Europe. But there's an agenda. I sense they've been talking behind the scenes, particularly with the French, that we'll find our way back into Europe. Don't worry. It might take a few years, but we'll get people on our side. We're going to try to get back into Europe. So let's make a few deals now to make it easier for us to rejoin Europe. We're being cheated in the background with that, and I feel this is going to be something that's going to be exposed in a big way. They're going to find something that's going to be revealed about secret conversations. Maybe it's a recording or something that someone pops into the scene to say, look, there's Starmer talking to Macron or something like that. There's something going somewhere along the line. There's something revealed about that. So that's going to be a big scandal that's going to be revealed in the 2024. And also, talking of scandal, There's going to be a lot revealed about Keir Starmer. I see when I look at him as a man, and I try to tune into him as a person. I just feel secrets. There's big secrets in his past and in his life, and perhaps even in his sexual life of some sort. Has there been something going on in the background? Is he possibly bisexual? I just get something that I don't feel I've revealed everything. Is there something? There's a big scandal going to be blowing about this. Something to do with what he's done in the past. Maybe there's a love child somewhere. Maybe he's had, has he been up to something that he's not made public? I mean, I'm not saying it's, if he's bisexual, there's anything necessarily shocking or wrong about that, but hiding it and putting up a false image is another thing. So there's something going to blow up about Keir Starmer, and I can't see him in power. I feel he's going to be pulled out of power. He's become quite unpopular quite quickly, because here in the UK, those that were joining us from America and things, we had a vote here, and the Labour vote didn't increase much, but it didn't increase at all. In fact, it had the same number of votes, but the opposition vote got split between Nigel Farage and the Conservatives, and so they were there in power really on kind of a minority of the voters in many respects, and those that did vote him are becoming very disenchanted over what's been happening. But Starmer's unpopularity is going to just increase and increase and increase, and once we get this problem revealed, and what was going on really with Lord Ali, who I've met Lord Ali. I know him in a loose sort of way from when we were on the Big Breakfast, and he's a lovely man, lovely man. But something's been going on there much more than what's going on. Has there been some backhander going on, some corruption of some sort that's about to be exposed? And does he know something about Keir Starmer that the rest of us don't? So I'm seeing him taken out of power. I'm seeing Keir Starmer taken out of power, and temporarily, it happened before, it happened again. Yvette Cooper steps in to the frame as a temporary prime minister. And there will be calls for her immediate resignation as well, because of her weak stance on immigration. So she'll be in for a short time and pulled out. And then what happens after that, I'm not quite sure. I'll have to look at that as the year progresses. But there's something going to happen there where we're going to get a big change in Keir Starmer. That doesn't mean to say the Labour government are pulled out of power, but they're going to be very, very weak because of this. So that's some of the things I'm seeing. So let's look at some of the other things I've got written down here, because I'm going off. A new underage knife crimes law will be introduced. This is something that's likely, I think, if we look at the news. But this is something I was feeling, because knife crime is a terrible, terrible thing. And it's linked so much in nowadays with schools. And it's also gangs. We're getting a lot of gangs, drug gangs carrying knives, young people carrying knives. It's cool to have knives. So I feel there's going to be some very big moves to try to, I mean, it's already happening as I speak, actually, but there's going to be some big moves to try to get knives off the streets. And much more restrictions on that type of thing, particularly within schools. And I feel that there's going to be new legislation brought in to relook at mental health in schools. There's going to be something that's happened, I feel, where there's going to be less of this, less of this sort of Ofsted type of thing where reports are published to rank a school. And when those rankings are sometimes skewered, because if we got a pupil that's misbehaving, well, we just exclude them from school, and that way we can exclude them from the figures. So we're pushing out a lot of kids that have mental health problems, making them work from home and pushing them out of the system just so we can get our ranking higher. So I see all that being overhauled, and that's a good thing that I feel the government are going to do with that. They're going to get in there and they're going to start looking properly at mental health issues, and restrictions also upon social media exposure for young children. A huge debate going to be in the air about that, like Musk has already alerted people to, about the idea of, censorship of people on Facebook. The Labour government are already inclined to be rule makers. Keir Starmer is a rule maker, so he's a regulator. He likes to bring in regulations, and there's going to be a lot of upset about the new regulations coming in for things like this, YouTube, things like Facebook, things like TikTok, and the rest of it. I'm seeing a big moves to regulate the internet in the UK. It'll backfire, and it'll backfire in a big way. We've got the new leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch. I see she's going to go too. I think my feeling when I've looked at her and I've tuned into her and I get the sense with her she's going to be quite a powerful person once she's let loose on the House of Commons. I feel that she'll be able to sort of put forward popular policies, and I feel she'll do quite well to begin with, but I can't see her continuing, because the Tories, I feel, are going to lose even more votes in the way ahead. So she's not going to be able to bring back the Tory party onto the stage and give the power back to the Tories again. What do you think? Put your comments. But I'm just seeing her go on. I felt as if she makes a good start, but is pulled out of power. So the Tories haven't sorted things out. They haven't listened to what voters are saying. And we're going to see particularly a rise in the Reform Party politically again. And they're going to make some very, very significant gains in the local elections. And what I saw in particular with them and Farage and his lot is I saw them taking lots of seats, of most obscurely perhaps, in Scotland. And I saw what I saw actually for this. I saw a blue thistle. When I was tuning in, I saw a blue thistle. I thought, what the hell's that all about? And I thought, blue, Tory, it's more associated with Tories. But then I thought, no, I felt Farage with this. So I think they're going to take a whole load of seats there, maybe up to 15 seats in Scotland. And Scotland, again, is going to be, the Scots are going to steer the UK ship a little bit with this in a completely different way than they expected before. And you know what? I see Boris Johnson leaving the Tories and joining Reform. There'll be others following him, but as a big politician of some sort is going to move, and I feel it's Boris Johnson. Maybe I'm wrong. There's someone else. Maybe there's someone else that's going to move that's big, but I found it was the top, ex-prime minister moving to the Reform. And let's see if that happens. But I feel we're going to get some big changes. They're partly triggered by this whole idea of the local elections. But I feel the Tories are going to have to really watch things, because I feel Reform's going to be a major, major challenger when we come to the next elections in the years to come. And much as I dislike the BBC, I've seen things happening with the BBC, and I'm feeling the BBC are going to have a new streaming service. There's going to be something that's going to compete with Netflix. It's going to be streamlined as well, the BBC. They're going to restructure everything. So less perhaps of the local programs, less perhaps of the multiple channels. I'm seeing something happening where the BBC is restructured in a completely new form. And it's going to be new programs, big scale programs coming out, like the idea I saw when I was trying to tune into this. I saw like the Game of Thrones, and I thought, could the BBC create something as spectacular as that? And I think there's going to be a bit of a restructure in the BBC, which hopefully will get it away from its wokey sort of agenda and its skewered news agendas, and maybe there'll be something there that's happening. I feel as if there's going to be big disruptions with more sexual predators exposed within BBC, more more coming to light. It's so easy to cover things up in the BBC. It's so easy to, you can hide Rolf Harris, you can hide Jimmy Savile and Gary Glitter and others. And I think there's more that's not been seen and still going on. So there's going to be something, there's going to be a big exposure. And I feel there's going to be, the BBC is going to be rocked in 2025 somehow. And I see it being re-looked at. And maybe it's only the Labour government that can put that in place, because if it was a right-wing government like the Tories or Reform, they'd say it was political interference. But because it's already a left-wing organisation in the BBC, I feel that actually the Labour government will be able to reform the BBC in a better way, just as really only Labour can reform the NHS, and only Labour can reform the welfare, because it's their domain in a way. So I'm seeing those things getting good reforms in the way ahead, but also a lot of crackpot stuff happening as well. I think the reason most older people tend to vote more right-wing actually is because they've seen Labour governments in the past, and younger people see an optimistic Labour government come in and then see what havoc people like Tony Blair could have wrecked the country with, and people like Callaghan and others wrecked things, and then you think, well, never again. But now we've had the same problem with what happened with the Tories, didn't we? So, and they were just as bad a lot in the end. So maybe there's something new, because I think reform's going to come to the fore in 2025, and we're going to see a complete shift in British politics. Okay, I'm sure there's a million and one things I could talk about here, but we'll save that for the more detailed videos where we'd go live later with these again. Okay, so that's the UK. Okay, now let's look at the Middle East and the Ukraine and various things like that. So, first of all, let's look at Ukraine. My first feeling is I saw an escalation in the war, actually, particularly at the beginning of January, because I sense that there's going to be a drone attack from Ukraine and into Russia as well, and some success with that. I saw, for example, an oil refinery burning and military equipment burning, and it felt like I was in Russia, because there was something there about a very bad smell in the air, which could be oil that I'm smelling. Or maybe it's even that nuclear power station in Ukraine. Maybe there's something from that, because I felt there's something bad in the air. There was something choking in the air around me. So there was a chemical component to this. So something happens, I sense, as being around the beginning of the year, before negotiations, if they happen, can happen. I just felt it's not going to be quite as easy as Trump has made out about being able to make a deal on this very quickly. So there's an escalation early on, and there's this chemical thing that I sense around me for that one. Now, also, if you look at my early on predictions about Ukraine, I saw something that I think is perhaps the first. It's often when this psychic stuff, the first impressions are usually right. When you start trying to interpret or change the impressions, often that's when you start to go wrong, because your own mind gets involved in things. So I had some early on predictions that I made about what would happen in Ukraine. Now, first and foremost, I said that there would be a war in Ukraine, and I spoke about that sometime before it happened, 6 months or so, I think it was, before it happened. You can check my video dates for that. But I said there would be a war in Ukraine. It happened. And when it did happen, I said that they poured in and they headed down towards Kiev, didn't they? And right on the outskirts of Kiev, the Russians were coming down towards it. And I said, I don't see that happening. I see the Ukrainians fighting like furious. And I said about that everybody's underestimated what the Ukrainians can do. And lo and behold, they pushed the Russians back. And at that time, when it seemed like Kiev could have fallen, I said, no, what's going to happen is Russia's going to have a thin slither to the east of Ukraine. Now, it's more than a thin slither now because they've gone into the Donbass, but we've always had that kind of eastern side of Ukraine, the battle going on and the occupation going on and so forth. So could I have been seeing right at the beginning a final conclusion to what would happen? Because I said that when the war ends, Ukraine would get a sort of victory because they would push the Russians back. They wouldn't find that Ukraine has been occupied completely as it was at that stage. But I saw a thin slither of land to the east, which is kind of perhaps that's the deal that Russia and Ukraine might be able to do under the guidance of Trump and the Americans, because that's what I saw. It's a thin slither down one side. So I think Ukraine will take back a little bit of Crimea. There's going to be a land deal done. That's the only way it's going to work, really. And I feel that Ukraine can't keep fighting. They're going to lose some of the land. There's going to be a compromise here. And there will be a deal done towards perhaps the end of 2025, I feel. I think we can do it in 2025, but I don't think it's as quick as they think. I felt further down the line. And Ukraine will give away and lose part of the Crimea. It will lose part of a slither of land down to the east, which will connect Russia to its ports and its fleet down in the Crimea. But I also sensed that the money would be given to Ukraine. Not you'll probably get some international rebuilding funds, but I'm seeing the Russian money go into Ukraine. The Russian money perhaps that had been frozen, that Russia would say, okay, we've lost that money. We're not going to get that money back. That money's been put on some on arms, but the rest of it, you're going to rebuild Ukraine. And I feel that is part of the deal. But the crux will also be that Ukraine will not join NATO. And that's what Putin will take as his victory chant. This is what we went into Ukraine about. This is what we wanted to stop. We didn't want them to go into NATO. See, they were going to go all the way, all the time. They were going to do it. We've won the victory we wanted. It wasn't just about land. It was about NATO. And although that's already backfired because of what's happened with the Scandinavian countries, that will be his victory chant. And that's how I feel it will work out. So I've been looking back to my early predictions about this. And I'm feeling that first impression was what we got. So a deal will be done eventually between Russia and Ukraine under the auspices of the Americans, putting some pressure on them to do that. But I also felt that there would be a second Ukrainian war later on, not in 2025 because I sort it out then, but I sense there would be a second Ukrainian war. And there could also be another war also with somewhere like Georgia. I felt as if something else explodes. It's like something else gets into a battle with Russia. So is there another country like Georgia or another bordering country to Russia that's going to have a conflict with them and want to break from the Russian influences? So that's my thoughts about that. And the Donbass and the some of the Donbass and the Crimea will be kept by Russia, but there'll also be that line will be thinned down a bit. So it's like a thin slither of land I see to the east, a sort of a corridor that could be the final map of Ukraine at this stage. There's been a lot of talk over the periods of time about Putin's health, but again, I don't feel he's as well a man as he makes out. And maybe it's not in 2025, maybe it's 2026, but I'm seeing signs of illness with him. And my feeling is he's not as strongly as in power as he likes to project. And the media there and the government there like to project. He's a kind of a dictator figure. But I feel when he goes, another person will follow him who will be just as bad as Putin. But further down the line, this is renewing some of my earlier predictions on this. Further down the line, a woman will be in charge of Russia. A strong, very strong woman, but there'll be a female leader of Russia. We got Putin, we got someone else, another one just as bad as him, but much down the track, quite a long way. We see a woman. I see a woman who has quite strong mystical roots, because I get the sense I was seeing Siberia for that. I kept seeing the forests of Siberia for that. And so there was some strange sort of figure actually I saw. I saw an image, a strange image of a woman in a white dress dancing in the forests of Siberia. I mean, it's a crazy sort of image, but perhaps it's something pagan is associated with this. And I had a feeling also that there's going to be a rise in Russia of a new kind of pagan Christianity, as it were. It seems like a joining together of Christianity and old pagan ways. And I feel that there's something about the strong female woman appears out of this new kind of spiritual movement that happens in Russia, that has been stimulated from old ideas from places like Siberia and the old ideas of slightly pagan sort of feel, a pagan Christianity, which is odd, but it's like a symbiosis of these two ideas. It's a Russianization of Christianity, or Russianization spirituality, which could become a very powerful force in Russia. Not in 2025. This is further ahead I'm talking here, but maybe we start to see the seeds of this. You know, have you seen something like that yourself? I've heard nothing of this, but I get the feeling there's a return to old Russian ancient ideas coming up, and that's going to be a threat to the regimes in Russia in the future. So looking a bit towards the Middle East now, and particularly what's happening in with Israel and things. Again, another one I predicted, wasn't it, that would happen. And I've also said that I felt that Israel will hit Iran, which has kind of happened in a way. I spoke a lot of them hitting the nuclear facilities. That hasn't happened yet, but my sense is that will still happen. I kind of saw myself from above. Again, I kept getting these visions of seeing things from the air, and I felt I was above in a fighter aircraft, and I was looking down below to a barren mountain range, and we're about to hit something in a barren mountain range. And I can only interpret that as being these underground type of defended nuclear facilities, and behind this mountain there was also, we would hit it, and there was also some fighter jets with me, and I saw shot down pilots and pilots being captured. Now, I've mentioned that in another video, and I still feel that something's going to happen with that. We're going to have some form of attack still on Iran, and that's going to happen whether Trump likes it or not. It's going to happen. So I feel the Americans will have to back this up, and Trump will back this up. I also spoke about the Mossad and so forth before affecting Hezbollah, and that's happened as well. I mentioned it already, but I mentioned it again here. But that strike when they hit all the pagers, that was a Mossad type of thing. So I got that right. And maybe there's another Mossad thing going to happen, another sort of Secret Service type of James Bond type of infiltrator that blows up something in Iran. I feel I'm seeing one of the nuclear facilities first being hit by a cyber attack, but I see smoke there. So something's happened, and I feel something's been knocked out there. And it feels like subterfuge. I feel like I come in with jets, but I sent someone in behind the scenes that's got in there. Okay, so that's one of the things here, because there will be like a massive disruption of Iran's communication systems. And I also saw the air filled with a cloud of drones as well. There's another thing I was seeing about drones, but drones are playing a very big role nowadays. But I saw a big drone launched from an aircraft carrier. Now, could it be that an American aircraft carrier is perhaps launching a fleet of drones rather than aircraft as a support, perhaps a defensive type of thing? I mentioned before about America's going to invest in drone warfare in a big way using artificial intelligence in the future. But this is perhaps not quite that. It's something where I'm seeing a big drone attack coming off an American aircraft carrier. So my thoughts are that America's going to get involved in this, and that we're going to get sucked into a much bigger, a wider ranging warfare there in Israel. It's not going to settle down quickly, and that's what one of the things I'm sensing with that. Also, similarly, that the drone thing, I've seen it from an American aircraft. That could be Taiwan too. I'm not sure. I mean, because I don't see it all clearly, but I saw an aircraft carrier with a cloud round it of sort of drones coming off. Could that even be Taiwan we're seeing that, or both? So there's thoughts there for that. There's also, I see Israel having oil. So they don't have oil in Israel. I went to Israel and there's no oil there, but I see oil being discovered offshore from Israel, or Israel making some claims to some oil offshore. Has there been a discovery with that? Is this Lebanon's oil or something, or Egyptian oil or something? I just sense as if they've offshore oil coming to Israel, which they're going to make a claim over during this period of time. I think there's been some gas discoveries, but I saw oil itself there. And Trump will support that and say that it gives Israel greater independence. I also see Russia and China giving support to Iran still. They've already done some of this, but much of this is going to be revealed. I'm seeing hardware given to Iran. I feel that Russia has also given some missile delivery system to Iran. Something was done on a deal over Ukraine when Iran helped out, that they've been using their knowledge of missiles to give missile technology both to Iran and also North Korea. Have got hold of some of this. They've been giving out this information, which is going to severely destabilize the way ahead and make it even more important that Israel goes in and puts a stop to the Iranians' movements towards these things. Now, I've spoken quite in detail about what would happen in Iran in other videos, because I see ultimately a revolution happening in Iran. I talked before about Iran having a return of the king, not as a king, but as a sort of a figurehead. And I see as if I feel the people welcoming back old ways. And I saw this these red and yellow flags flying for some reason, which people have discussed now on earlier videos. So ultimately, I feel that there will be a resolution, because I feel that the Iranian regime will eventually cave in. In fact, I predict that in 2025, we see the death of the Ayatollah al-Khamenei, the Ayatollah, you know what I mean. I feel that there's going to be we see the end of him. Whether he's taken out or whether he dies naturally, I'm not sure. But I feel, I just feel as if he's out of the picture for some reason, and which actually paves the way for a peace process eventually. So I will sort it out in 2025, I feel, but there's still far to go. There's still conflict ahead. It's not going to be as quick as people would like. Eventually, I feel that Israel will even take the West Bank and will expand its borders, but whether that's coming another time or whether that's going to come this time, I'm seeing like buffer zones put in place in Lebanon that stay permanently as part of the Israeli territory, claimed as. So it's going to be quite a difficult situation. Gaza will eventually be absorbed into Israel, and the people pretty much pushed out of Gaza. Gaza pretty much demolished, I feel. So there's going to be quite a difficult period ahead, but I don't think all that's going to happen in 2025. But I do feel as if there will still be further conflicts with Iran, and it's going to be pushed further and further. And I also see the oil being hit in Iran. I keep seeing burning oil refineries. Now, I've already said that earlier about Russia having something like that, but I feel it's also in Iran too. And this is why there's going to be oil problems for Europe later on with shortages of oil and blackouts and things happening because of oil shortages. So oil prices are probably going to soar because of this, I would imagine. But I saw this oil being an oil crisis worldwide, though, is averted. I don't see a full scale oil crisis worldwide, but some of these things are temporarily disruptive to the economies of the world. Trump's going to put sanctions back on Iran as one way to start to stop things, to try to use sanctions to stop the development of the nuclear facilities in Iran. But I feel that will fail this time. It's too late. Iran's got the money back that it shouldn't have had. It's got plenty of investment. It's got plenty of supplies of money to rely on. So I don't see the sanctions on Iran. They might have worked in the past, but I feel other things bring them to the table, and it's by force they're brought to the table to negotiate. I feel they're going to be a big interaction also with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is going to step up again to try to be the negotiator, and I'm seeing Saudi Arabia and some of the Gulf states all coming together to try to tame Iran and tame Israel. Ultimately, it will be kind of although America's going to be involved in this, it's actually going to be the Saudis that I feel are going to sort the situation out there. They tried it once before. They got quite a long way along with it. Things for a while looked very optimistic. Iran hated that idea because Saudis and Iranians hate each other. But I feel as if with the help of America, ultimately it will be sorted out using Saudi Arabia's influence and the power of oil, of course, as well, would be very much. So they had the Abraham Accords in the past, and I'm seeing these being revisited and a much bigger and better arrangement put in place with that as an optimistic way of seeing the way forward, and much more peace between the Arabs and the Jews longer term, and a lot of cultural interactions happening, shared cultural work, shared, talking about their cultures, maybe arts and music and things like this, becoming a kind of a healing force between those nations. That will be, I think that will start to see that in 2025. So in a way, this is one of those situations where arts and culture and music heal and an understanding of each other's ways. And I feel very good about the way Saudi Arabia will deliberately try to engage in these things to bring us peace here as well. And again, I feel, some involvement of Musk's Tesla lot being involved in military stuff. I spoke about it in the American predictions, but maybe Starlink is I'm seeing here, because I feel that there's going to be involvement with some of the high tech stuff. They're going to try out some of the high tech stuff in this war. America's going to try out some of the high tech drones and AI in this war. They need to test their systems in a way. But anyway, I think what I'm seeing here is I feel there's going to be peace in the Middle East eventually in 2025. Towards the end, we've still got a lot of damage being done in Lebanon, but I feel it's going to get worse before it gets better. But after a hit on Iran, I feel that they are brought to the table. And with the death of the Ayatollah and maybe the death of some others, I'm seeing perhaps they've been hit, and the rise of the women's movement there, I feel there will be peace by the end of 2025 in Israel and Iran, of course. So these are some of my predictions now for the Far East, Asia, and China in particular. And I will refer you actually to some of my earlier videos on some of this for the future history of China and what I've said I feel will happen and see happening in China, some of which has begun to manifest quite prominently in the things that I predicted in the past. But so I may need to revise some of this, revisit some of these things. But I'll tell you some of the things I'm picking up as well about China, India, and the Far East, and what's going on there. So, first and foremost, I feel these US sanctions are obviously going to be massively important for the future of China in particular. 60% tariffs put on in China is going to, anybody looking at this is going to say, that's going to hit things bad. Now, I said in the past that I saw China having its own second revolution because of economic issues that hit China at the time. And these will bring a new uprising in places like Hong Kong and other areas and other of the old cantons around China rising up, and a gradual breaking up of China into smaller units, like a Europe in the end, but more democratic, and particularly with the very strong influence of the teachings of Sun Yat-sen, who was one of the early fathers of Chinese modern culture, really, and politics. So those things I see happening around China. So could it be that what I've been talking about some time ago is going to become manifest in 2025? Because clearly there's going to be sanctions put on China. Those sanctions are going to cause social unrest. It won't in itself bankrupt China. China's a very resilient and strong country now, but there's a lot of issues that are going on in the background of China that most of the news outlets don't talk about. China's got some very dodgy problems in the background. So my feeling is that this sudden lack of being able to export to the US comfortably is going to see it hit the poorer people, actually, the workers in the factories that are going to be pushed out because there's not the work for them to produce these cheap goods. They're already working on near slave labor wages in some places. So there's going to be a lot of social unrest as this gradually begins to bite, and it will move. They're not immediately, but as it bites, it will go as we move through 2025. My sense is that I'm seeing more protests, an uprising again in Hong Kong, but also in other areas around China as well. And there's a call for the removal of Xi Jinping. There's a call for him to go. And China is very dominated by apps. When you make payments for things, they don't like hard cash, because with hard cash there's freedom. We can learn a lot from this in the West, that if you want to control a population, don't give them the ability to be able to go anywhere or do anything other than unless you use the app which we watch you on. But I predict that Alipay, and also I think it's called WeChat, will be hacked. One or both or multiple. I feel there's a big hacking thing, something with some Chinese dissidents working within China will cause these organizations to crash. And if you take the app out of function in China, everything runs by that. If you think about it, everybody, even the man on the street polishing your shoes, has to use the app to get the money generally. And there's a lot of that happening in China. It would bring the Chinese economy into a sort of a sudden and abrupt halt. And I feel there's some attempts to hack it, and I feel it works. And temporarily, it stops. There's going to be a lot of movements, clandestine, hidden, secret organizations developing in China. Already we have the Falun Gong movement that's gaining momentum in China. It's banned in China. It's shown a lot here in the West in terms of the dance things and things that are happening here. But there's going to be a lot of attempts to repress these organizations. We'll start to see in China the sort of the secret police being pulled in. We'll start to see the realities of an oppressive communist regime. And we'll hear more about that. And many disenchanted Chinese people will turn to these hidden movements. And I'm feeling there's a strong kind of resistance building in China that's going to start to pop gradually in 2025 as the economic situation starts to decline. So history is usually slow. It's not something, there's not often that many sudden turnarounds. We get the Hiroshimas of this world and things like that. But generally, the decline of nations, the changes of nations, the changes of governments, we saw it in America, for example, it takes a long time to get to the outcome. But I do feel that in 2025, we're going to start to see the seeds of this. We'll start to see the start of the slow but sure collapse of China as we know it now. And it will be better for in the long run for China as well. China won't be falling into absolute poverty, but I see a breakup of China eventually and the rise of these democracies. I'm again, when I was doing my predictions, I kind of saw a map in my mind's eye when I was doing my meditations of this, and I saw like a smoke over China. Sometimes when I see a smoke arising over something, I know something's not good with that. And that was kind of happening spontaneously as I saw this, but I'm not sure quite what that is. But I think it's symbolic, perhaps symbolic of big changes in China that are usually slow to process. But I feel China's future is about to turn the corner now. It's going to go in a new direction. And we might see the end of the Communist Party gradually, not in 2025, but we're going to see some huge shakeups with that. And in time, I feel there will be a sort of a civil war in China, but the seeds are there now at the moment. And that civil war won't be like the Maoist revolution with the massive bloodshed and all the terrible cultural revolution and everything. It'll be much more subtle than that. It will be much more subtle. Not with so much bloodshed for some reason. I don't know quite why a revolution is usually full of bloodshed, but I see not huge bloodshed when that happens. So there's going to be a revolution, and perhaps it's something to do with this cultural thing that might be able to, there's this refusionic sort of mentality being in China where everybody refuses to work. That non-violent type of way, like Gandhi projected with this Ahimsa idea. I get the feeling there's going to be a kind of mentality shift. We refuse to cooperate with evil. That's what Gandhi more or less said. So something like that is going to arise in China, but a Chinese way of doing it, a Chinese way of doing it. So I'm not seeing it clearly, but there's this turnaround, and we may start to see the beginning of those type of things appearing in China. Just like in Tibet, they tried to protest by setting themselves on fire and giving themselves as a sacrificing themselves to make a point to the world's press. I don't think anything's quite as extreme as that, but it's like a mass movement I'm seeing here of non-cooperation, right? In the past, I also had this dream of China. I've spoken about it before, but I'd say it again. There's not everybody's following now. Has been with the channel quite so long, and some of you have been following me for years. But you might remember I also talked about a dream I had of China, of a land of mud, and I was walking through that land of mud and struggling through it, and I found a house on stilts, and I climbed up that gangway and into this wooden building, and inside there was the most beautiful dance going on, an incredible, beautiful dance, and it was called the Dance of Flowers. And there was Lao Tzu, the great Chinese philosopher, religious type figure there with a long beard, a typical lot of Chinese, conducting it and saying this is the future of China. And I know there's been this whole dance movement going on in China, and Jane and I are going to go and see that soon, actually. But I mean, I'm not saying that people should follow that, not by any means. But I feel that it's like a cultural revolution, a cultural rebirth can be part of the thing that inspires China to a new direction. And that dream, which happened a long time ago now, 10 years or more, I think it must be now. I'm not quite sure how long ago it was. Yeah, at least 10 years, 2008 or 10, something like that, a long while back. God, I'm losing it with the age. Yeah, but that was a very powerful dream for me. I wrote about it in one of my books once too. So I feel that there's hope for China yet. There's hope for China yet, and it will be cultural. So we're going to see the beginnings of that in the destiny of China beginning to unfold. And as I've said, the return to the teachings of Sun Yat-sen as one of the as a model for new democracies, plural, in China. And when this does happen, I'm just really talking quite a long way ahead now, because I've spoken a lot about China before, but looking quite a long way ahead, I feel that Russia, who is trying to be China's friends at the moment, will actually try to compromise this change. What happens now? I don't think. I think I'm looking further ahead than 2025, but maybe the seeds are here now for this. But China, I feel that Russia will try to compromise that. Russia will become the enemy of the Chinese people, and may try to land grab when this happens in the north. I saw the north of China but they will be driven back. They won't win with that. So there's a prediction I'm making now that might come up some years ahead. So mark my words on that one. So I also feel there's calls from the Chinese people for greater freedom in China and Tibet generally. This is what I've written down on my notes here. I see an uprising of people becoming disenchanted with the changes in the financial climate. So that's a reaffirmation of what I've just said before, but I'm just reading from the notes here as we do this. And so I'm also wrote down that towards the end of 2025, in particular, the Chinese economy will experience a sudden downward shift. So I think financially, the world will have to be careful towards the end of 2025. There's going to be if that happens in China, it's going to affect the whole world. Perhaps by that time, the world economy's adjusted to some of these ideas of tariffs and the new way of doing things that America's going to be putting forward. But I feel that China's collapse itself is getting more imminent. It's getting closer to us. Maybe 2025 is the year when we will start to see a complete change in China, and that revolution in China that I feel will happen. And we'll see the signs of it. The crisis is on its way. The full crisis, from what my feelings are, I anticipate it's probably going to be 2026 when we get this. And I feel that the economy slides, people feel dissatisfied. And also, Taiwan is under threat at that time, because nothing worse than if things are going wrong at home, you want to direct people's attentions overseas, and it doesn't take far to start looking to Taiwan. So again, Taiwan crisis. I thought it was going to happen in 2024. So I'm either completely wrong with that, because I'm fallible. I don't claim to get it all right, but I get quite a lot right from if you follow the channel. Maybe it's still think I don't feel right about Taiwan still, and I feel that there's going to be some trouble there as well. And again, I also feel not quite right about Xi Jinping. Does he step back? I get a feeling he might be ill, or there might be something that's going to stop him. Maybe he thinks, I'm going to get out of this while the going's good, because if things are going to go wrong here in China, and I feel they are, I'm let someone else take the blame for that, so it don't come on me personally. So I feel Xi Jinping is going to step back. We have perhaps a new leader of some sort come in. I feel there's illness there too, so he won't admit to that, but I sense there's something, he's not too well in himself. So Xi Jinping and some of his team are going to step back and put new people in the front to handle the dissatisfaction that's going to arise in China at this time. So I've mentioned also Taiwan. I've also mentioned, I haven't made notes this time about Japan, but remember, in my previous video, and I'll point you to my previous video about Japan out there, I felt as if there was going to be a major earth change around Japan. I saw a smoke type eruption type thing that's going to have consequences for the whole Pacific area. I saw something big with that, and that I felt that was imminent too. So there's a big one coming off the coast of Japan. Japan's kind of a mega quake that I was talking about in that video. I saw sort of and I also felt simultaneously that would be eruptions around the world at the same time. California would be affected by this too, not the sweeping earthquake that they had in the past in California, but I feel there's some serious concerns there at the same time. And I saw like a gas cloud, like when I said China there, I saw that gas cloud. So there's this gas cloud of some sort in the east, which may be from volcanic or something happening, because that's what I saw, and that thing will move. It'll be important to know which direction it takes. So that's that. So I've told you about Taiwan. And I'm seeing also in Taiwan that there's going to be a big increase in military spending in America as it sort of pulls its money out of NATO. I don't feel it's going to be quite as, I don't think it's going to pull out of NATO, but it's going to make others pay the bill in NATO. But there's lots of research and development going into new technology, just like Reagan wanted to do the Star Wars thing. I'm feeling that Trump's going to do a similar sort of thing to what Reagan did. We're going to get a new sort of iron domes over the world type of thing. So I'm seeing new technology being tested in Taiwan, a defensive dome, a bit like what happened in Israel, but much more advanced than that. Drone based this time, and we don't have to fire expensive missiles. We can knock things down with drones, and I get a feeling like these drones have something to do with working with sound or a frequency that they can fight with, and they can't be knocked down with sound, but they create almost like a sound dome, something with a vibration. It'd be a very advanced form of technology coming out there, which is going to have very important effects on other things for helping to move things using sound, I see in the future. So the technological advancement. Perhaps I should save this for my technology section of this. And as for North Korea, again, I don't feel he's very well manned. And I feel that he's going to have a problem with both his heart and his bowels simultaneously. And I sense with him that there's going to be some problems with his health, which it will make the headlines in 2025. I haven't done major predictions for India because I can only do so much, but I'll probably make a separate one for India later. My feelings, however, were that India's going to change its allegiances with Russia. India's going to start looking, although there's tariffs being put on, and that's not going to be good for India. I feel India's going to have to start thinking, well, we're going to have to start negotiating a bit more with the Americans. And I feel much more trade with India and Europe, for example, and also India and Australia. And India's trying to move a little bit away from the pariah that is Russia. Russia's been a friend to India in many ways, but I'm feeling as though that move's going to change a little bit now, and India's going to start. India's on a process of becoming a much more powerful country. I've spoken before about India in the long term, that it will become the leading light in the world in the centuries to come, and particularly when Indian spirituality blossoms again, because there will be a spiritual awakening around the world that I've spoken about before. But a large part of this is going to come from India in the future. But I'll probably do something else on India a little bit later as a separate video for that one. Okay, so now let's look at Australia and New Zealand. Sorry, New Zealand. I know you don't like to be lumped in at the same time with Australia, but you're all in the same area. Anyway, we're going to look at what I feel for some of those things there, what's happening in there. Now, I don't know anything much about what goes on in Australia. I've tried to tune into some of the things that I feel with Australia. I feel that when I was sometimes, like I say, I sometimes feel like I'm floating over the country looking down, and I'm drawn into these areas, and things pop out, and maybe there's things I miss and maybe there's things I get right. But I just, one or two things come to mind when I was tuning into Australia. And I feel what I saw was Australians would experience a lot of economic woes in 2025. I'm not quite sure how things are going in the Australian economy, but you're obviously also going to get some of the Trump tariffs affecting Australian exports to the USA. And then you've also got the diminishing demand from raw materials that will also be in the decline because of China. And I just felt, I could feel that Australia's, it's not hopeful for those traditional markets in Australia. Though I also sense that new fields of expertise will be developed, that sometimes when we take away one thing, something else pops up. And the Australian and New Zealand people are both entrepreneurial people and clever people, and I'm seeing new developments in Australia, and going into much more into the ideas of development of AI and things like that, which has obviously become a worldwide phenomena, and creative thinking and new ways of doing things. So I still feel that you'll get through, but it won't be. It's like Australia, I feel, is trying to find a new way economically. That because of this, a lot of the complacency that might be in politics and things, I feel is going to change. I feel there's going to be a big change and sweep in the politics of Australia. So the Australian Labor Party, for example, I feel will lose the next election. I feel there will be a lot of casting of blame on things like cultural changes like woke and things again. I think worldwide I see this happening. People rethinking values and the role of the male in society, for example, which has been kind of pushed down all the time around the world. A return to perhaps to earlier type of thinking. And when the Labour Party go, I get the sense there's going to be a coalition type of government that follows them. I don't know if that's practical in what happens there, but I just felt there's a close contest, and I felt a coalition type of join up here of something within the Australian policies. Two parties get together, but I feel as if their existing Labour Party will go. And many of these sort of moves for Indigenous representation, I feel, will be reversed, both in Australia and in New Zealand. Again, there's been perhaps the tolerance has got to the point where the tolerance has gone too far, and it's become you overweighted these things. And I feel there's going to be a kind of a bit of a public resentment to these things. I'm not talking about what's morally right here or not. I'm just saying I feel and sense that there's going to be a backlash to this. And in New Zealand too, a backlash to people. For example, recently we see the disruption in the New Zealand government's parliament building, whatever you call it there, being disrupted by a Maori war dance. I can understand them doing these things, but I feel public resentment turns both in Australia, whose rules and laws have been kind of made hard to enforce without getting approval from the Australian native people. So I'm seeing conflicts here with this, and a kind of a reversal of these things, and a lot of heart wrenching sort of upset about this in Australia. But I'm seeing the swing towards the older ways as opposed to the new modern thinking. So some of those things are going to change. So these will be kind of stronger opinions, stronger governments and attitudes with this. So I also sense that there will be a strong anti-immigration movement generally in Australia, particularly as we start to see in Australia, and I think the same thing in New Zealand, very similar type of environments in some respects, obviously different countries, but I get the sense that there's housing shortages, and I'm seeing I'm talking more Australia here, I'm seeing house prices rising significantly and getting completely out of people's grasp. In fact, what I'm seeing in Australia is what happened here in the UK, where nobody can afford to buy a house because you've got to spend you're 35 years old before you've managed to save a deposit because the house prices have gone up so much. And I'm getting this sense of this happening in Australia, actually Canada as well. I feel this too, but I feel it's getting out of hand. And I'm seeing the collapse of the high street too. This is what happened here in the UK. Everything went online, all the small businesses went bust, all those nice little places we could go and shop and get a cup of coffee and go out shopping and browse, and the windows all gone, boom. And I'm feeling that happening in Australia, and I'm seeing damage to small businesses, and the online and a move against online shopping, and an attempt, I feel, will be made to stop the strong influence of online shopping, possibly with tariffs put on deliveries or something like that, something to get people back in the high street and stop people being dependent upon online delivery. And so I'm seeing that as being a move that Australia will make to try to retain its kind of culture of a high street as a community, really. Now, I mentioned before about that China is going to put down barriers with America over what I see as rare earth metals and things like lithium and so on. And these will cause problems between America and China, because America's going to be desperate, because I see a big sudden increase in home manufacturing of electrical goods. So Australia's could boom on this. Australia, I feel, has those solar resources. I see new resources being found, and this would be rather good for the country. So there's a possibility here that there are areas where new expertise develops. So like I said, I see a decline in the general economy of Australia, but new things popping up, and that's one of those examples I see. And I see also a trade deal being done with Australia and Japan. Big trade thing going on with Japan, and also with the UK and Europe as well. It's like we're bypassing what's happening in America and looking for new markets, and those new markets are being found in places like Japan, and less so with China. Less so with China. I feel more and more antagonism towards China. I'm seeing Australia investing more and more in military equipment to counter the potential danger of Chinese potential future invasions of Australia, submarine technology and battleships and things like this. So I see that happening. And I also saw a serious sort of shipping incident on the Great Barrier Reef. Perhaps it's another one of these oil spills. There's a couple I've seen around the world for this, because I'm wondering if I'm seeing it in the wrong places with this, because I'm also seeing a similar one later on when I talk about Canada, but perhaps there's more than one, because I saw something with the reefs being damaged again, unfortunately, and I saw oil or chemical spillage of some sort, and like I say, I'm a bit uncertain where this happens, so sorry with my vagueness on this, but I felt somewhere pristine. So it's either Australia or it's all the far north in Canada. I know they're miles apart, but I'm just, these are one of the things that kept popping up when I was doing my meditations to see what I was being shown for the future. And unfortunately, I also see the big bushfire in the Northern Territory in Queensland in Australia. Sorry, but I'm seeing massive, great Northern Territory and Queensland area bushfire. I mean, I know they can appear anywhere in Australia, but and you do get them all the time, but this looked like quite a big one. So New Zealand, very similar issues to Australia. Again, I feel a new trade deal between the two countries. I feel much more trade happening between New Zealand and Australia. I feel the country's becoming very much more embedded in helping each other quite a lot. In New Zealand, I know you have a lot of earthquakes there, but I feel as if there's an earthquake in the Northern Ireland, and this is all tied up with what's happening, with a big one happening in Japan. I don't see this as devastating and flattening cities or anything. I mean, I don't feel unsafe with this, but I feel as if there's higher than usual worries about an earthquake in the Northern Ireland of New Zealand, but I don't want to sound alarm bells and everybody start panicking and not going there and things like that. But Japan as the concerning one to me, but I feel as if it's ricocheted through to parts of New Zealand as well. Okay, now let's do some predictions for Canada. Now, the main thing I saw with Canada when I tuned in to see Canada is I just felt people homeless. I felt that I can't afford a house. I feel that there's real serious issues with housing people and shortages of housing, and a public backlash for this. So I'm feeling there's going to be quite a lot of demand for change with this, and a demand it's going to become such a big problem, that it's going to cause a political change in Canada. Trudeau is probably going to be going, I feel, because I just feel economic issues, and particularly for young people, like disenchanted young people, I'm sensing here. Similar, I suppose, to what we've had again in the housing problems here in the UK. They've also been having it in other countries. But I feel Canada, it feels coming to a crisis point. And particularly now that tariffs come involved with America, I'm seeing Canada struggling with this. I'm seeing economic problems in Canada. It won't be overnight, but a gradual slowdown in the economy of Canada in 2025 is going to put more and more pressure onto the housing issues of Canada, that I feel people are going to demand a change. There will be some good news for its economy, I feel, because I'm seeing oil prices going through all over the place, and actually oil becoming more valuable. And as Canada has oil resources, I see that it will help balance the economy a bit better in Canada. But it's the imbalance is what I'm feeling is the problem. People will have a feeling of imbalance. So I'm seeing, and Canadians don't usually make a lot of fuss and don't normally make a lot of protests, although there was that truckers protest that you remember I predicted that happened. But I'm seeing another sort of form of protest in Canada. I'm feeling people out on the streets again in Canada. I'm feeling that people are going to be very, very disenchanted once the money dries up. And trade deals with the USA become more difficult. I'm sensing that there will be issues in Canada and a change of government there. Again, a secondary thing, I've talked about this scramble for rare earth metals and things like that. I'm seeing new industries there opening up in Canada, trying to move into the manufacturing of high tech goods, and being doing very well with those areas as well. But most importantly, I feel there's some big political scandal going to blow up in Canada. It'll be around Trudeau and that. I've said before that I felt he was being compromised by China. I said that a year or so ago. A lot of that has been fed out bit by bit, but covered up quickly, I feel. So my sense is that Canada's going to have serious issues with their politics. I see a big political scandal in which bribes have been taken from China, and this will be proven. This could affect politicians of all parties. I feel it's just not just one side of the house, as it were, whatever you have there in Canada, but it's like all sides, both Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre or something his name is in there, both sides. But I feel that we're going to see the fall of Trudeau. He's been ready to fall for a long time, and I've said he'd go before, and I was wrong before, but I still feel he's ready to slide. And in the next election in Canada, and I think we got one coming up in 2025, haven't we? I think, because I'm seeing it happening, and I'm seeing the Conservative Party there winning the next election in Canada. And Canada, although it's going to face some economic troubles, and people will vote accordingly to this, I feel there will also be a global trend away from this liberal sort of liberalism generally. And Trudeau's going to be a figure of the past. And I feel concerns also here. I'm sensing also something about Canadian health care. I also feel there's going to be some big argument about, just like we're getting NHS discussions here in the UK. I feel that that's also a bit of a collapse in that. I feel the healthcare system don't seem to be working. And perhaps in 2025, what I'm seeing here, it feels like a caving in of the healthcare system and people getting ill and not being cared for. So something with that, and older people and health and mental health care, I feel the whole thing's become an explosive point, particularly as we're sort of financially struggling with things. It's like the money in the pot has all been spent and there's nothing left. And now we need someone else to come in and change this. So I'm sensing elections, and I'm not sure, but I think Canada has federal elections in around about October time. No, that's going to be earlier than that. I'm seeing those coming forward. I feel earlier election. So I'm seeing this happening quite soon. I'm seeing this happening May, June, that sort of time. And the House of Commons I see there is going to pass. Do you have House of Commons? And can I show you how little I know? I'm a psychic, that's all. But I'm seeing like your equivalent there of the House of Commons passing a motion of no confidence in your government. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think Canada's in need of a radical change, and I feel it's happening. Now, I also mentioned in my Australian predictions I saw an oil disaster, but I also wasn't sure if I saw this big oil disaster or there's two of them, because I felt as if there's one in Canada as well. Because I saw pristine landscape being destroyed by a big oil spill, and it felt like it was a shipping oil spill to me rather than I think it's a shipping thing that I'm saying. I felt like I was up in the north of Canada, the Northwest Passage up the top there, a very big oil spill that will affect a pristine environment. So that's a sad note to leave it on. So that's a few thoughts just for Canada, because I know we have quite a few people that follow the channel from Canada, and thank you guys for following me today. So that's most of my predictions for now for 2025. And so whole swathes I've missed out there too, of course. I've not spoken about Africa. I've not gone into detail about South America or anything like this. But if you keep watching the channel, I'll obviously be including some of those things in future videos as best I can. And bits crop up all the time. But it's a long job to put all this in. And thank you for having so much patience in following me so long on this channel, both long-term, those that been following me since about 2015 or so when I started, right up until now. But we do live in interesting times, don't we? I mean, there's certainly making predictions about these times is fascinating to do in many respects, because so much seems to happen in such a short time nowadays. And we are in a very major turning point in human history, particularly with AI. I mean, all of us have been astonished at what we see arising in AI and the possibilities of what it can do for the future. And I feel that we're going to see things that are even more astonishing with this as we move ahead. And we'll see a lot of it in 2025. Massive advances in hospital treatment and work with things like I've mentioned about bacteriology and hormones and things like that. But be able to sort vast amounts of information that will give us new healing techniques for the future. And I'm seeing with AI particularly being applied perhaps in 2025 more than ever to medicine, because I'm seeing treatments coming up that are drugs like designed for the individual. It looks at your DNA, it looks at your condition, looks at your body types and things like this. I'm seeing something coming up where they're kind of personalized drugs that are made just for you. So it takes into account everything in your system. So great advances that I feel we're going to be very, very close in 2025 to getting a final understanding of how to deal with cancer. It's not a one size fits all thing that I'm seeing here. I'm seeing like individual treatments. It's something they work out where we can say, right, we designed this, it goes into your cells and it goes directly to you. Only you can use that drug or that therapy or whatever it is that I'm seeing here. So I'm going to see considerable advances in AI, and that's a good one. Also, there's the dangers that we're going to face in 2025 and beyond of how reliant we become on AI to do things. It's going to revolutionize all sorts of industries, every industry you can think of. We know this. We've listened to the people talking about this, but it's going to affect us on a very spiritual level too, like the use of endless flicking through screens on your phone. Who would have thought it would have changed the mentality of the people that watch it? How would have thought that young people nowadays, particularly who have been brought up entirely having that sort of short attention span sort of viewing of things, would actually begin to suffer from inability to hold their attention. Many of the ills that we've had in society, I think, have come from weakness in developing the human spirit. They haven't had real world experience. And all of us are being sucked into this. All of us are finding that our mental faculties are being damaged by this. How many of you now can add up in your head mathematics? I remember when we had the old decimal system, 12 and 9 plus 3 and 6 and all, 4 and 11 equals, you could do it quite quick. I couldn't begin now. You can work it out if you want. Base 12 thinking. But I mean, all that all changed when along came the calculators. And now we've got the internet, which obviously changed our ability to retain knowledge. We don't need to remember things anymore now, do we? We can just look it up. Why do I need to know the date of the Battle of Hastings? I can go and look it up. All basic information is gone. We can't add up. We don't understand the theory of maths much now. We don't understand anything we want to look up. We don't integrate these things into our thinking. We don't think about history and think and look at the world and see how the world can change. We've become very negative and very blinkered in the way we can see the world. We don't have much understanding, because knowledge is not just knowledge. Knowledge is learning to relate knowledge to other knowledge to come to another conclusion. So it's the ability to foresee things, to think about things, to consider things. But we all live in the immediate, don't we? Now we all live in this immediate thing, and we become very intellectually lazy. And this is going to be one of the big problems of the way ahead. Not just the dangers of will the robots take over the world, which was another problem, but are we losing our abilities as humans to think? Or is it a better thing that we can focus on other things rather than have to think about all the learning algebra at school? But I think it's a danger. It's not just what you learn, it's the ability to think. And the ability also to create is being destroyed by AI. So AI is going to be one of the big worries of the future, but it's also going to be one of the saving graces of the future, because I also see it being applied to the quantum type of worlds that people are exploring at the moment. But I'm sensing, I've said it before, but I see one day that we're going to crack how to get absolute energy out of nothing, as it were. We'll be able to do 0 point energy. We'll be able to pull the energy out of the universe and have unlimited energy, which could completely transform the world. We could green the deserts of Australia. We could green the deserts of Nevada and Gobi deserts and all the rest of it. We can use water, fresh water, if we have as much as we want, if we've got unlimited energy supplies. We can do incredible things with that. And I feel AI is going to take us towards that. So I'm seeing possible cancer cure coming very soon. I'm seeing possible new energy source coming very soon, which is going to revolutionize the world. But we've got to look to the other part of this world, because these are all very material things. These are very, very material. Why are we here? What is the purpose of human life? Human life is not here just to fulfill our material desires. Human life is here so that we can become fully human. We are here to flower. We are here to become awakened human beings. And again, I've spoken about this before, about the importance of looking at the world in a way that we don't just see it as events happening out there. We're not worried about what happens in this politics or that politics or what happens. All the things I've talked about today with these predictions have been very materialistic type things, if you think about it. What's most important is what is happening to the human spirit now. Where is the human spirit? Where are you in this process of the awakening of humanity? I feel that at some point, we're going to see some heroic type of spiritual figures coming into the world. The world's in a turning point, a massive turning point at the moment of information and the use of information and human faculties becoming obsolete. But I feel there's an awakening coming. I've talked about this before, but there's some heroic figures coming into the world, I feel. I feel that there's a new awakening coming, and I've mentioned this before at the end of other videos from previous years, but it's happening. I know many people who are getting much more serious about their spiritual side. People that come to me for readings, for example, often in the past, they used to ask about relationships and money and all the typical things that upset material life. And that was always still the same. But more and more people are asking, what's my purpose in life? More and more people are asking, what can I do in this life to make it better? What can I do to make the world better? A lot of people are asking about what I can put in. And I've been a medium for most of my life, of practicing medium for 40 years or more, and I've seen how people's questions have changed. And people are asking more and more, what can I do? How can I awaken? How can I become a more spiritually minded person? And I find that very, very reassuring, because that at essence is why we're all here. This is what the awakening is all about. It's about each individual first asking those questions. What can I do? How can I awaken? And eventually that awakening will start to happen. Like I've said before, it's not going to be some massive event that's going to wake up humanity, even if the UFO people came here, which they're investigating at the moment. No, it's not going to be something like that. It's going to be each individual waking up one at a time, like a million little lights that gradually illuminate the whole world. It's our duty to awaken. And even if these heroic figures that come into the world, which I feel will come in, will be some great big spiritual movements happening. I've hinted at some of these when I've talked about the things happening in Russia, for example, and things like that. And around the world, there will be big upsurges of spirituality. But all of that is still out there. What is important is our individual awakening. And that's why we should have no fear, because everything out there is all experience. It's all the world outside. But in here, in the depth of your soul, there's a quiet place. There's a spot where you are one with God. There's a spot that goes beyond experience. There's a spot that goes beyond thinking. There's a spot that goes beyond feeling even. There's a spot that is like pure love, but even goes beyond that. In the center of the soul, where you are focused, there is a light, and that light is you. And that's what we're here to discover. That's what we're here to awaken. That's what awakening is. It's awakening up with that inner eye, that inner self, that inner knowledge. And when we all start doing that, we'll become less concerned about all the problems in the world and all the troubles out there. There's still just the troubles out there, and we'll do our very best to solve them. We'll do our very best to take suffering out of the world. But we need not suffer, because we are one with that divine energy within ourselves. And if we can find that, then we'll find happiness in even the most dreadful of worlds. We'll find happiness that we can share with others and make the world a better place. Because it's easy, really. It's easy to sort the problems of the world out. It's the people that are mainly the problem, isn't it? And what you and me and all of us are those people. And if each of us makes an effort to allow ourselves to understand the true significance of the divinity that lies within us, that beautiful inner peaceful place, that place filled with light and love and peace and joy, it's there. You can go beyond the problems of your thinking, go beyond the problems of your depressions or your fears or your worry or your hopes or your grasping after things of the outer world. Just find that place within, and be happy. Well, thanks for joining the show, guys. I got a bit carried away there at the end, I think. But and if you've enjoyed it, do always remember to give us a thumbs up, the usual things, and have a look at my website for all the services we offer for psychic work and so forth. And my books, don't forget to have a look at my books, and you might be inspired a little bit more. And my movie, of course, that's on Amazon Prime and so on. But anyway, great to be with you, and I hope you continue to join me through 2025 and beyond, in which we'll make more predictions and have some more insights and thoughts about the way the world's going. Again, thanks for joining me. See you soon. Bye for now. So do you like what I have to say? And do you like my work? Well, why don't you support my work? Have a look in the description below to go to my website, find out about psychic readings, find out about our Naadi readings with the Indian Naadi Oracle, buy my books, and join my workshops online by Zoom. All there on the website psychics.co.uk.